Okay, stand by, Mr. Grady.
Oh, okay, we got that. No, they're, well, this one they says we're not.
Talk about it before it's even on the agenda. So see you.
I'll be seeing you Friday too. Or tomorrow.
Sure, will.
Okay. That's the laptop.
Yeah, you don't forget anything. You're not getting over that
The laptop.
Hello, is anybody else joining besides Tom Grady?
Did you push the button? Okay.
Right now, we're waiting for there, we're trying to test it. I just heard somebody. Hello, Mr. Grady.
There's a toilet, right?
Don't worry about it.
Thank you.
Will you be in St. Pete next month?
Had to be me, or nobody else next to me.
Hey, Chris, just so you know, they come to us at 9 o'clock. We're going to be up on the shop at 9 o'clock. Why? Because the schedule. Yeah. So they're on a one shot. So I suggest wrapping this for whatever it is.
Old and retired.
Hey, lady.
Are you Mr. I had to ask, because I looked up online, anyhow, the Howard Upperman, the two little girls that you came over and said, I have 6 kids, do you remember those? They're almost grown now, and my printer and my computer are both acting up, and I couldn't print up the pictures, you could see them, but anyhow, his name is Howard Upperman, he lives on No Road, and he's been working nights, so he doesn't get to do a lot with the party. Anyhow, I'm glad you're still there. I will never forget, you weren't there yet, when I went back a number of years ago to get my, where I had to work. There was a surplus of teachers, I had to go to work for the city at welfare. I was a social worker for years. And I wanted to get back into teaching. And I went over to get my certificate, trying to get it renewed because all my classes in Florida. I don't recognize this man for what else. And so the gal took my certificate number 848550 and ran to open the doors and said, come see this. I've never seen a certificate this old before. And that was 20-some years ago.
Not too long ago.
I had to ask, even with our organizations, was that Joe?
Yeah.
My name is Judy Youngblood. You have to tell him hello for me.
I will, Judy.
We worked real hard.
Are you part of the Republicans Women's Club?
No.
The party?
Yeah. I've been Sister Republican since 1960.
Yeah.
So, but Joe, when Joe was running, and he has an uncle, had an uncle who was in the
Governor George Ellis.
Yeah. I had never saw what happened. Last time I saw it was in Stepping Forks.
Yeah.
So where does he live?
Right over
haven't run into him anywhere. They got elected at 80. The committee woman. 2 years later, we get in chair. He asked me and tried to discourage me from applying for this. How much money?
Yes, good to see you again. Everything well?
I got my old age money. It'd be worth it. You know, when somebody's going through that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We're on mute.
Judy, I'll make sure I send you.
Is this gonna go?
Well, I'll get one of my calls for you, Woody, but
I'm doing something.
Well, then no one's.
Here, Matt. Did you drive over last time?
Test 1 2. Test 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16. Yeah, thanks. Hey, Chris. That's fine. Then we just got 6 feet of distance. Huh? How come we don't get 6 feet of distance?
You ready? If everybody could take your seat, please, we're going to get started. Good morning. I want to welcome everyone to the June State Board of Education meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order at this time and ask you to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. At this time, are we good?
Don't share video yet, first.
At this time, I'd like to recognize a very special guest to address the board, Governor Ron DeSantis.
No, that's right.
Governor, you've been recognized.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you're good to go.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. I hope you all are doing well. I wanted to make a couple comments about some of the things that you guys are doing. But first, I want to thank you for all that you've done. I think we've made a lot of progress over the last couple of years, and I think we have an opportunity to do a lot more. So I know you guys are going to consider the critical race theory prohibition, and obviously that's something that we've been supportive of in my office. I think there's 2 issues here that are really fundamental. One is we have to do history that is factual. And if you look at things that have grown out of critical race theory, it's much more about trying to craft narratives about history that are not grounded in fact. So for example, this 1619 project that came out a couple years ago, the folks who created that said that the American Revolution was fought primarily to preserve slavery. Now that is factually false. That is something. Now that is factually false. That is something that you can look at the historical record. You want to know why they revolted against Britain? They told us. They wrote pamphlets. They did committees of correspondence. They did a Declaration of Independence. And so when you're trying to say that, that is not something that should be taught because there's no basis in fact for it. So I think it's really important that when we're doing history, when we're doing things like civics, that it is grounded in actual fact. And I think we've got to have an education system that is preferring fact over narratives. The other thing is, if you look at some of the things that have happened throughout the country in some of these places, there's really outrageous things going on about what they're doing by basically using critical race theory to bring ideology and political activism as to the forefront of education. That is not what we need to be doing in Florida. We need to be doing educating people, not trying to indoctrinate them with ideology. Some of the things that we see throughout the country, they're actually in upstate New York. We were looking at these examples. They taught that they forced kindergartners to watch videos saying that racist police and state-sanctioned violence, will kill people at any time based on race. You have things in Arizona where they had an equity toolkit saying that babies show racism at 3 months old and that white children are racist, by age 5. So some of this stuff is, I think, really toxic. I think it's going to cause a lot of divisions. I think it'll cause people to think of themselves more as a member of a particular race or based on skin color rather than based on the content of their character and based on their hard work and what they're trying to accomplish in life. And so I think that what you're doing is the right thing to do. And I would also say, and I think the thing you guys are going to look at, recognize this, in Florida, we require teaching actual history of every part of American history. The history of slavery in America, the Civil War. Obviously, the idea that you wouldn't teach that, which some people say it's a straw man argument, that obviously led to 3 major amendments to the Constitution, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. You look at things like the Civil Rights Movement, leading to major legislation like the '64 Civil Rights Act. So that is not only should be taught in Florida, it is required to be taught in Florida, and it absolutely should be. So that has been in statute, just like we have things in statute about teaching kids about the Holocaust and other really, really significant events in not only American but world history. So all of that is in statute. All of that will absolutely be a part. But when it departs from the historical record and then when it goes into trying to create narratives that basically are teaching kids that the country is rotten and that our institutions are illegitimate, that is not worth any taxpayer dollars. It's wrong, and it's not something that we should do. So thank you for what you're doing. Final thing before I go, I know that the school districts are looking at the upcoming semester. I think most of them have already decided that the kids should be able to go to school normally, that they should not be forced to wear masks. But I think that that's important that we do that statewide. If we need the legislature to do something, then that we should have them do that. If the board has the ability to do that, then they should really do that. I think most of the districts are there already, but I would ask that that we get a good reporting on that relatively soon, so that we know what we're looking at. That should not be required, and I think when we go into the August, when the schools come back, it's got to be a normal school year, and that's what we should be doing, and I think that's the best formula for success for our students. And so thank you all. We really appreciate it, and God bless everybody.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis, and thank you for all you do for our state. Okay, if you'd like to speak to the board today about an actionable item on the agenda, please fill out the speaker's card and give it to Chris Emerson or Matt Hargreaves over here in the corner.
Here, you can go on this side.
When we get to that portion of the meeting, staff will present the item. We will hear comments from those who submitted speaker cards, and I ask that anyone addressing the board please do so with respect and civility. Also, we will be limiting the time allotted to speak to keep the meeting going at a good pace. And I would also like to remind everyone to silence your personal devices so that we can proceed with minimal interruptions. To help in managing the meeting and the best use of our time today, all presentations will be limited to 5 minutes unless announced otherwise. When you have 1 minute left, the yellow light will illuminate, and when your time is up, the red light will come on. I just want to emphasize that that's 5 minutes and not 5 minutes and 2 seconds. So please keep your comments inside the 5 minute rule. Now that's not for the public comments on the actual item. We will get to that when that time comes. All right, next I would like to recognize Dr. John Avendano, President, Florida State College of Jacksonville, to welcome the board and provide the COP update. And you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everybody. My biggest fear now is the yellow light, I think, going forward. But on behalf of Chairman Mac McGee, who is with me today, of FSCJ, Commissioner Corcoran, Chairman Tuck, members of the Board of Education, Chancellors Hall, Hebda, and Mac, I want to welcome all of you to FSCJ on behalf of our faculty, staff, and more importantly, our students. Thank you for all that you do. I had the opportunity yesterday to show a few of you some of the things that we are very proud of here at FSCJ. And we are proud to be part of the Great 28 here in the state of Florida. I've been here for a little less than 2 years as the president, and I can assure you that my time here has been exciting, has been meaningful, and I am excited to have the opportunity to lead this institution. I want to thank again the governor for his support and the legislature for the work that they have done to help the Council of Presidents and the Great 28 that we have here in terms of our appropriations and the funding that we have received. We cannot thank you enough for that support. Some of the things that we're proud of here at FSCJ, we were here most recently in the last couple of months, selected as one of the 16 most promising community colleges to work in the country. That is a reflection of the work of our faculty and our staff and the efforts that we have put forth. Some of those things include partnerships in our community, partnership with the Duval County Board of Education, partnerships with charter schools, partnerships with the University of North Florida, and partnerships with our business and industry, including the Jacksonville Transportation Authority, which some of you saw yesterday with our autonomous vehicles. So again, we're proud of being able to deliver the education and the training that this community and our citizens need here. We serve over 44,000 students in the Jacksonville and Duval area. Duval and Nassau County area. And we serve a diverse group of students, and we meet students where they are. We believe we are this community's college. And one of the things that I have great pride in is the fact that our students, they stay, they live, they work, they graduate, and they contribute back to this community. So one more thing that we're very proud of. Things of the partnerships that we've enjoyed are things such as with the University of North Florida expanding the healthcare programs at the higher advanced levels. They will actually reside in one of our facilities, so we're excited about that. The partnerships with the K-12 systems include, like I said, a charter school over in the west side of our district and the expansion of dual enrollment with Duval County schools and a number of our charter schools here as well. We are also excited to be a partner with St. John's River State College in the FinTech program. One of the things that we really think that is going to set this region aside from the rest of the country. Financial technology and making the resources available and the workforce available for our business and industry is going to be critical for this area. So in partnerships with them and our banking industry and our financial industries are one more thing that we're very proud of. On behalf of the Council of Presidents, I extend their welcome as well. We thank you again for your support that you have given all of us, again, from the resources that were necessary this past year, and then obviously the funding going forward. I know in conversations with my colleagues, and I had 2 of them this morning before I came in today, again, they wanted me to extend their deep appreciation to the work that all of you do. So we greatly thank you. We hope you enjoy a great day today. You've had an opportunity to see some of our programs yesterday, from cybersecurity to our IT programs to our truck driving program, our FinTech program, but today I hope you hold a little appetite for our culinary program, one of our programs that we're most proud of. I've had the opportunity to, I think I'm one of the best customers, quite honestly, but I think you'll find out the reason why this afternoon. So again, welcome to FSCJ. Thank you for the work that you do, and we look forward for your continued work. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board? You didn't even make to the yellow light, so we got.
Yeah, man, I was thinking.
Any questions? Thank you for having us yesterday, and please extend to your staff our appreciation. That was very, very informative. You got a great system going on here, and we really enjoyed the logistics, and so thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, Commissioner Corcoran, can you please present your report?
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the President and FSCJ for hosting us. It's a fantastic place, and we appreciate it. I'd like to start by recognizing 3 of Florida's outstanding school leaders. Every year, 1 principal and 1 assistant principal are honored for their exemplary leadership in guiding their students at their schools to success and for their engagement in the local community. We also honor an individual while they are not a teacher, they are still a leader and are just as important to the student's success. As I mentioned each individual, who are all seated up in the front, I ask that they would please stand, and afterward I'll invite you to come up for a photo with the board, if that's okay. First is Jennifer, she goes by Jen Pryor-Halter, principal of Green Cove Springs Junior High School in Clay County, as the 2021 Florida Principal of the Year. And as it happens, these first 2 nominees, we say this is going to be the, Principal of the Year. She's at a junior high school. As soon as we announce it, we like to take credit. Now she's a principal of a 1,600 student high school, Green Cove. And the next nominee was our Assistant Principal of the Year, now already as a Principal of the Year. So we take vicarious credit for that. But Jennifer has served as the principal at Green Cove Springs Junior High for 6 years. During this time, the school has maintained an A rating for their school grade. Principal Halter set high expectations for all of the students at the school. She initiated Cougar Nation, a school-wide maths program to provide targeted support to students. She also created academic acceleration opportunities for all students with the establishment of pre-ACE courses. Through Jennifer's leadership, Green Cove Spring Junior High School received the Positive Behavioral Interventions and Support Gold School Award in 2020. Her superintendent, David Broski, says, Ms. Halter embodies everything that a great leader is and does through her work. Jennifer will receive a cash prize of $3,500. Congratulations, Jennifer. Next, Zemine Belda Harris, Assistant Principal at Booker T. Washington Elementary in Hillsborough County, is the 2021 Florida Assistant Principal of the Year. She has dedicated her 13 years in education to helping all students achieve success, which led her to Booker T. Washington Elementary School. As the school's assistant principal, Zemine helped improve the school grade from an F in 17 to a C in 18. Ms. Harris instituted weekly professional development sessions with teachers focused on data-driven planning, as well as climate surveys and conflict resolution to increase the school's culture. She established a parent-teacher association for the first time in 5 years, resulting in 90% of families becoming involved in school activities. Hillsborough County School Superintendent Addison Davis stated, Zemine Harris is the model of excellence in the role of an assistant principal. She grasped the essential need for a simultaneous, relentless focus on academic achievement, a positive culture, and equity for all students and stakeholders. Zemine will receive a cash prize of $2,500. Our final recognition this morning is the 2021 Florida School-Related Employee of the Year, James Henry Jr. from Florida State University School District. He has been a teaching assistant with the school for 4 years. James designed and organized a K-Mentor peer tutoring program and planned the Employment, Education, and Career Expo. James also coordinates after-school tutoring, chaperones on school trips and special events, and created and launched the Walk to Success shoe closet to ensure children in need have new shoes and socks to wear. Mr. Henry implemented the SMART program, Success Maker Academic Resource Technology Program, to provide additional supports to students who need it. This past school year, he re-engaged distance learners by calling them on the phone to prepare them for their new teacher and visited every middle school class. Thank you, Mr. James, for what you do to ensure student success. And as the 2021 School-Related Employee of the Year, Mr. Henry will receive a $10,000 check. Now, everyone would please come front for...
Jump up for me. Good job, guys. All right, everybody, we ready? Big smiles here. Perfect. One more right here for me, okay? I got it. Thank you so much. Good job. All right, ready? Squeeze in for me. Perfect. All right, best big smiles. Perfect. One more. Got it. You want to add in again? Add in super. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Perfect. One more. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Okay, and then let's do all three really quickly, if you don't mind heading back up there. Yes. Congratulations. Thanks for all you do. All right, looking good, everybody. Squeeze in a little bit tighter for me. Thank you. Okay, and ready? 1, 2, 3. Looking good, guys. One more. I got it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's it.
Nothing else?
Nothing else.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the commissioner's report?
So moved.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Nay? Oh, motion carries. Is Vice Chair Johnson on the phone, or? Okay.
I am.
Okay, I just didn't hear you. Sorry about that. Okay,
Oh, no, I had it on mute. I'm sorry.
okay. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the March 17th board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we will hear from Dr. Diana Green, Superintendent Duval County. There she is.
You know what, I said my commissioner's report is over. If I could just interject 1 second before Superintendent Green speaks. You can stay there, Superintendent. but I will just tell you, and we're looking at the preliminary results of third grade reading. Hopefully they'll be finalized any day. And just scanning the state, and you heard the governor's comments. I was asked the other day by somebody during COVID, how did the superintendents fare, and anyone stand out in particular? And I said, yeah, all the superintendents were fantastic, but the one who stood out in particular, and I hate to say he was number one or whatever, but arguably number one in the state, the first large district in our state to open up the earliest, on time, and I think your ultimate percentage of face-to-face instruction was pushing 90%. And looking at these preliminary scores, I mean, again, they're not finalized, but I think we're going to see that Superintendent Green has done a fantastic job, just a remarkable job. And the other thing, as the governor said, was I think Superintendent Green was one of the first superintendents, and when it comes from a large district, it's super impactful to the rest of the state. But she said, next year we're going back to school, and we're going to go back to school normal and resume our operations as we always have, and masks will be optional, is what you heard the governor mention. So before you give your presentation, Superintendent Green, on behalf of the board, we just want to thank you for the absolute fantastic job you did during COVID in leading this district and setting an example for the rest of the state.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Commissioner Corcoran. I know that every superintendent in the state of Florida faced tremendous challenges, and we want to say thank you to you and the state board for your support and assistance as we maneuvered this most challenging time for school districts. Do I get 10 minutes too?
Yes. You
Oh,
do.
okay.
I'm sorry, I thought I said that.
No, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
If you will indulge me, I am here representing Florida Association of District School Superintendents, but I wanted to share a letter that went out to our 13,000 employees on the last day of school. It reads, Dear Team Duval, one thing I never tire of is commencements, and believe me, I've been to quite a few over the years. Seeing the mix of emotions in the eyes of the new graduates is always such a satisfying way to end the school year. And at every graduation, in at least one of the student speeches, I hear the word, congratulations, class of 2021, we made it, followed by rousing applause from their fellow graduates. Never before have those words rung so true, not just for our graduates, but for all of us. Congratulations, Team Duval of 2021, we made it. And just like the parents of our graduates, I couldn't be more proud of you and everything you have overcome and achieved this school year. It was an extraordinary year by any measure, marked by adopting to layers of mitigation strategies, constantly changing student schedules, and seemingly endless confrontations with challenges, big and small, all met with hopeful ingenuity. That's our team. Educators and those surrounding them are principally problem solvers, resourceful beyond MacGyver, and emotionally gifted with a willingness to overcome any problem, to teach the children and meet their other needs as well. And through it all, you never lost sight of your role on our team. All of us were dealing with COVID-19, and many were engaged in energy-consuming endeavors to deliver a successful building referendum, and finally to manage a contentious process to consider the names of 9 schools. Any of those issues alone would have been plenty to handle in a normal year. We somehow managed through all 3 in 2020 through 2021 school year. Yet, despite the distractions and daily complications, your focus on teaching and learning and taking care of our students never wavered. Whether you are the classroom teacher who graciously welcomed another student back from Duval homeroom with a smile, the paraprofessional who was reassigned morning duty to assist with the growing number of bus riders, the maintenance worker who arrived at the school to ensure the AC was functioning before students arrived, the IT tech who delivered hotspots to schools to ensure remote learning students could access their assignment, or someone else in any one of dozens of support roles forced to pivot and adapt to this year's challenges. We could not have done this incredible work without you. In more than 3 decades of my career, I have never experienced anything like the year we just lived through. I look back with inexpressible thankfulness for all of you. I also look forward knowing that if we can conquer 2020-21, we can conquer anything. Given what we just accomplished, I know there is no goal beyond our reach. Because of you, it is the best time ever to be a child in Duval County Public Schools. Have a great summer, everyone. You have made tremendous difference in a time of historic adversity. Get some well-deserved rest and know that I am equal parts grateful and proud for everything you have done for students. This letter is not unique. This letter probably could have been any school district in our state. Our superintendents went through unprecedented challenges this year, but we are very thankful to our commissioner and the board by helping us mitigate some of our challenges with the DOE emergency orders that were issued this year. On behalf of the Florida superintendents, FADS, thank you, Commissioner, and for those emergency orders and the support you have given us. Now that the regular school year has ended, superintendents have turned their attention to summer programs and the next school year. In Duval, we will be serving over 20,000 students in our summer school programs. While we don't know yet our statewide assessment results, districts are diligently monitoring student progress and are prepared to provide, as Duval, robust summer learning programs using ESSER funds to remediate or accelerate academics for all students. Even though school districts may not have their school grades, they are also working with deliberate speed to eradicate the academic consequences of COVID-19 and get students back on track, making appropriate academic progress. The availability of federal funds allows superintendents to not only create robust summer learning opportunities, but extend those learning opportunities into the next school year. The people in this room recognize that Florida is at the forefront of K-12 education. Florida was the leader in opening schools and returning students to in-person instruction. Florida will be the leader in returning students to pre-pandemic learning through collaboration with the Department of Education, thoughtful use of federal funds, and the dedication of teachers and school support staff and district staff. Florida superintendents are devoted to this cause. As superintendents, we look forward to the 21-22 school year. We still see difficult terrain that we must traverse as we enter into this new school year. We understand that we are making a transition to the best standards. Superintendents must also prepare for new laws, revising curriculum and required instruction, requiring additional parent notification on various topics, mandating a moment of silence, modifying student identification cards, and much more. These new laws require districts to adopt or revise policies and prepare teachers and staff before the start of the next school year. School districts have embraced the best standards. The best standards will start with grades K through 2 ELA, which we are very fortunate to have a strong DOE staff that has done tremendous work on helping us prepare for the implementation of the best standards. Superintendents also continue to prepare for grades 3 through 12 ELA and K-12 math standards implementations and new statewide assessments starting in 22-23. The new ELA and mathematics instructional materials will also be reviewed and purchased over the next 2 years. The move to the best standards provide a fantastic opportunity to improve student learning, but also presents the challenge of change. I bring attention to these issues as a reminder that COVID isn't the only matter schools are dealing with, and to help complete the K-12 education picture. It is easy to lose sight of the breadth and magnitude of the issues our students, teachers, and staff contend with. Education is dynamic. Teaching and learning is evolving. As superintendents, we must adapt and lead through challenges and change. It is a charge we undertake with great resolve, and FADS appreciates the assistance of the Commissioner and DOE staff provide as we move K-12 education forward in the state of Florida. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Green. Do we have any questions from the board?
Chair Tuck, I have a question.
I knew you weren't going to get away without Marva Johnson.
Yeah, but and I'll apologize if I sound a little hesitant at some points because I'm watching as well, and the video's on a slight delay. I just wanted to congratulate Dr. Green. It really just warms my heart to see her here with us today and to hear her success and the success of her students and families in Duval County. So thank you for your commitment, Dr. Green. We are all very grateful. I also wanted to hear a little bit more about the percentage of students who are going to summer school for remediation this year compared to prior years. And I also wanted to thank you for putting that American Relief Plan and CARES Act money to good use by making sure we move forward with our efforts to accelerate learning, not just return to where we were, but to continue to try to get better.
Board Member Johnson, thank you so much. Here is a picture. The average summer school cost for a district the size of Duval is somewhere between $2 and $3 million. We're serving a little over 2,000 students during summer school. The summer school cost for this upcoming year will be somewhere between $16 to $18 million because we are serving over 20,000 students. We are offering a full day summer school. Students will, even if they are there for remediation, they will have art, music. We've built in field trips. We want this to be robust and an exciting experience for our students, knowing what they've been through over the last 18 months.
Thank you. That's helpful in terms of framing perspective.
Say that again.
I was just thanking Dr. Green for those comments because it really helps me to kind of frame scope or perspective.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Dr. Green. Okay, we'll move on to the action items now. We are pulling action item number 4 from the agenda, and I'd like to recognize Jacob Oliva, Chancellor, Division of Public Schools, to provide an overview of the first 3 items now that we've pulled number 4 off.
Yes, thank you, Chair Tuck, Commissioner Corcoran, rest of the State Board. The next few items that we're going to talk about is some of our most fragile schools in the state of Florida. These are schools that you have been asked to review previously, and we're excited to provide some updates. As Chair Tuck has mentioned, the Warrington Middle School in Escambia, we're still doing some work there to make sure that their plan is exactly where we want it to be, so when we welcome students back in August, they have all the supports that they need. And we're going to have them come back in the July meeting because there's still some conditions that they're working through and assurances that they want to make sure they get this plan ready to be approved. So the first item that I'm going to bring to your attention is a turnaround plan option for Marion County schools. If you remember, Evergreen Elementary School is a school that's been in front of the State Board. It's been graded at least a D for the past 3 years. And in fact, the school improvement team and myself has had some really good conversations recently and have visited the school and met with the superintendent of school as well as their school board chair. And the option for the plan that they're submitting today is to meet the assurances and requirements in this plan is to recommend the closure of that school, which is an option that's available to schools that are in turnaround. When a school is being recommended for closure, we still stay in contact with the students of that school, and the district does have assurances that need to be met that are in the plan that we're seeking for approval today from the board. And basically, the assurances are to make sure that students from the closed school are assigned to a school grade of a C or higher, and that those students will not be assigned to any instructional personnel who has rated as unsatisfactory or needs improvement in their evaluation. And we will monitor those students for at least 3 years as we want to make sure that they have success. We have worked with the school. There are neighboring schools that have capacity. Unfortunately, Evergreen has seen a lot of declining enrollment in that area. And working with the school districts and the leaders, I know oftentimes we get asked, what is the plan for that facility? While their local board has approved their plan to recommend closure of the school and the reassignments of students, I don't believe they finalized what they intend to do with that facility yet, but the topic of conversation is to turn it into an early learning center and really focus on that community providing kind of a head start to prepare students to be kindergarten ready. So they're going to continue supporting the community where that school is and make sure that those families are served. So for your consideration is the approval of the turnaround plan submitted from Marion County.
Okay, Commissioner, do you have a recommendation?
I agree with the recommendation.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the Commissioner's recommendation for Marion County?
So moved.
Second.
Got a second? Got a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? Any discussion from the public? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
The next item for consideration is the turnaround plans for Hillsborough schools, specifically for Foster and Oak Park Elementary School. If you remember, over the past couple years, we've had some conditions that we have put in place with some expectations for that school to improve. Well, recently in February, Foster and Oak Park requested an additional year of turnaround for implementation for the 2020-21 school year, and that request was approved by the state board following certain conditions were met, and that was to replace the current external operator, replace the current principal, and retain all of the highly effective and effective teachers. Hillsborough did appoint a new principal and submitted all of the documentation that met the teacher requirements, as well as contract with a new external operator. For the 2021 school year, Hillsborough contracted with MGT for all 8 schools, and then specifically for these 2 schools as well. We had their plan up for consideration for extension back at the March State Board meeting, and at that time, there was a request from the State Board to provide an update at this meeting on some more recent progress monitoring data so that we can ensure that the students in some of our most fragile schools are making the progress that we had hoped to see them achieve. So what we would like to do now is have Superintendent Davis from Hillsborough Schools present that last kind of quarter of progress monitoring data, share the update of where they are, and then have consideration for continuing with the recommended turnaround plan for these schools.
Okay. Superintendent Davis, I want to remind you, you got 5 minutes. If you could keep an eye on that yellow light, please.
Yes, sir. Chair Tuck likes to push the accelerate my 5 minutes, but nonetheless, thank you so very much, Chair Tuck and the board, and also Commissioner of Education, Commissioner Corcoran, for allowing us to speak today and to go over some of the elements of where we are from Foster and at the same point of Oak Park. To jump directly into it, let's get to Foster Elementary School. We know that Foster has 377 students that we serve every single day. Of these students, we see that 45 teachers that are there that are educate our children every single day to make certain we create magical moments. Of the 45 teachers that we serve in Foster, 53% of those teachers have 8 or more years of experience in education. And then we have, when you look at this particular school, 96+% of the students are free and reduced lunch. When you look at these trends, you see historically from 16-17 to the last time we took the FSA assessment in 18-19 to the accountability system, there has been a downward slide related to the overall efficiency of the Foster Elementary School. There's a number of reasons due to the causation, due to leadership, concentration, making certain we maximize moments of learning, leveraging core curriculum, tier curriculum, supplemental curriculum, leveraging professional development, and all those things. However, I can tell you over the last 15 months that I've been in Hillsborough County, we have really galvanized together to partner with MGT, the school-based leaders and teachers, and you see today that I represent a movement that shows we will be making double-digit gains related to Foster's accountability system. We see that we have been a double D to an F, and then we are projected to be into the C range for the first time in many years. This is a calculation that shows you all of the tiers that have been unpacked and that we have focused on related to the state accountability system. Of the 7 tiers, you see that in 2018-2019, that Foster was at a 30% related to a F school. And as we look at all of the matrices using the iReady data, one concentrated data set, being able to do a correlation match from what happened in 2018-19 to where we currently are today. You will see that of the 7 areas, 6 of the 7 areas have made and projected to make progression. And this truly identifies that we have leveraged the iReady diagnostic publication that was released in October 2019 that really shows the crosswalk between iReady and the efficiency identified in the FSA in the elementary sector. In addition, this is a glance, and I want you to be able to look at all of the, the first column on the left in 3rd grade in the fall. You see that there's 5 tiers in iReady. It gives the red, which is the color tier, which is the lines, which is 3 or more. It identifies students who are 3 or more years behind educationally. If you go to the solid red, it's 2 or more years behind. The yellow is 1 year behind, and the solid green is students who are early on grade level, and as you looked at the striped green, is students who are meeting the threshold of mid or above grade level. If you look at the continuum of ELA and math, you see that we are moving the needle of reducing the number of students who are multiple years behind in the areas of literacy and mathematics. And we are improving the numbers at Foster of students who are meeting grade level expectations or above in both of these categories as well. Some of the celebrations you can see in 4th grade, we moved from 51% of the students who are 3 or more years behind to 26%. That's a 25% decrease. In addition, you'll look at 5th grade as well when we move the needle of 22% of our students, not only at early grade level, but moving them to on grade level or mid-grade level, showing celebrations. And as you transition to mathematics, you see that we decrease in the area of 3rd grade mathematics, that 32% of the students who are 3 or more years behind in a celebration in 5th grade, moving the needle from 11% of the students who are meeting grade level to 31%. And this is all the concentration of our work. If we go back to the work related to mathematics, there's a number of elements that we are pushing through to make certain there's concentration. We're building relationships with MGT. We're providing ongoing professional development. We're using a number of analytics to drive and prescribe the work every single day and focus on the mental health work along the way. As we look at Oak Park, this is our 2nd tier. Oak Park, we serve 422 students at this particular school. We have 46 teachers on site, and 67% of the teachers have 8 years or more related to their concentration of the work within education. And this school has 98% of the students that we serve every single day for free and reduced lunch. Some of the same token related to their work. We see that historically they've had downward trend, and we are projecting to have a 50% threshold well into the C. While we may say that's a great movement from 27 to 50% in the predictability using iReady, we know that that is an aggressive side of it, but we will see a double-digit gain in this particular area.
Okay, I'm sure there's going to be some questions from the board, so Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Superintendent. Can you talk a little bit, the iReady, I think, data is impressive, but how does that compare? How much of that is due to COVID and just sort of the delays in students learning virtually versus sort of some of the reforms that have been put in place?
So we definitely have seen, COVID kind of present many challenges educationally. The good thing at both of these schools, the majority of our students are face-to-face instruction, over 85% at both of our schools. So we're having that great connectivity. We do see that there's some unfinished learning that we had to address related to the March 2020 to the end of the summer. We have done a really nice job accelerating our curriculum guides, connecting with MGT, working with coaches, building the capacity with our educators so they understand the spirits of the standards so they can triage and be able to have individual small group work with our children along the way. We see that there's, through our analytics, through iReady, we see great gains, and this is the hard work of our teachers. They've been heroic, and our leaders, and we're very confident that both of these schools will transition and have double-digit gains when released in July.
So, in other words, what you're seeing in the data, these are not these are not following the same trends as other schools or whatnot.
Absolutely.
These are definitely your
And I think it's just all about the concentration and the partnerships that we have. It's about making certain you have the right instructional frameworks, the right leaders, your maximized moments of learning, you're really using analytics to prescribe and start the conversation for the learners and allowing us to move forward.
Thank you.
York. Remind me, Superintendent, is MGT, is this the first year of the contract or the second year?
So MGT, before me coming in 15 months ago, that we were split, we had a external operator was failing. They had 4 schools, and MGT had the other 4 schools. So me coming in, I really wanted to have a concentration of a local provider that was in our particular area and had historical trends of moving schools in a positive manner. So I brought all 8 of our extended operator schools together in Hillsborough County. So this will be a renewal of the contract from this year going to next year for all 8 of our schools, particularly with Oak Park and Foster. For me, it's very important to have consistency. This is a year that we have really built trust, we built relationships, we built concentration, we've had focus, and not only the instructional side of the work, but MGT's been a really big player with allowing us to identify what's happening before students come to our schools and what happens after our students leave our schools. To have 360 accountability and really focus on not only developing the whole child, but develop the whole family.
Do you have that broken down by grade? So can I see ELA 3rd, 4th, and 5th?
I do, sir. Same mentality when you look at Oak Park. Oak Park, you have, once again, when you look at Oak Park 3rd grade, 70% of our students were, below grade level or 3 or more years behind. When you look at 3rd grade, what we've done now is move that number, decrease that number by 41%. And that is super attractive with concentration. Also, we look at 5th grade. 5th grade was 63% of our students were 3 or more years behind educationally. We have decreased that number by 32%, and that's all through small group instruction and really taking the time from our teachers to conference with children so they can take ownership and understanding of their learning to be able to accelerate their mentalities and academics along the way. And the same thing, you see it with mathematics. Continue to move the needle in every arching way, in every grade band that it counts. And all of this is all about unpacking data for everyone. Every student was in our Survey 2 and Survey 3. That means these students count on the state accountability assessment. Now, we teach every child, but these numbers give a realization of what factual information will be when the information comes in July.
Mr. Petty?
Superintendent, can you tell us a little bit about the involvement of the parents or what you're doing to involve parents at the school?
Yes, sir. It's major. One thing we did is, we reimagined our school district. We had some community centers, and we reimagined them to be, a family and engagement, community engagement side of it. So what we're doing is openly while parents couldn't come to our schools due to COVID, we went into the community. We used Sanchez and Just. We went into our home associations, our apartment complexes, all to be able to make that connection with our parents. We used a number of conversations related to having virtual parent nights so we can identify where the learner is educationally, behaviorally, attendance-wise, all overarchingly to make that connection. We leveraged social workers in our staff to make certain that we had that connectivity so they completely stayed abreast of where their learner was academically within our schools. It's been challenging with COVID, to be very honest and transparent, but we try to be as creative as we can to make certain that we reduce attendance. We increase attendance, we reduced tardies, we made certain that students were on our campuses, and when they were quarantined, we set up quarantine centers. We made certain that they had all the necessities, whether it's in print or through the connectivity through software, so they can continue their learning momentums.
Where would you say the parents are? Have they bought into the plan?
I would say yes, sir. I mean, from our side of it, prior to going into this, we were really aggressive about the mentality for our school district. And after I got a chance to come and meet with each of you in March, one thing we did is that I immediately within the last week, MGT, went to our staff and we presented the same PowerPoint and talked about we need you to make every one of our staff members, our faith-based partners, our community members need to step up and show that we truly, genuinely care about our neighborhood schools, our schools in Hillsborough County. This is our strategic plan. This is our blueprint. This is what we're going to do to make sure we have a thriving organization every single day. And hats off. Shay McCrae is our chief of transformation. She's been in the community. She's here today with Rachel O'Day and Star Connor, who are regional superintendents. They've lived in our neighborhoods, and they've lived with our kids, and they understand the complexities, but we've also removed the barriers to make certain that we know that they are the concentration and most important in our district.
What's the demographics of both for free and reduced lunch?
So free and reduced lunch for Foster is 96.8%. And if you look at Oak Park, the free and reduced lunch is 98%. The majority of our students related to demographic, the majority are minority students of color within both of these schools.
Explain again on 5th grade ELA. You have 7% that are at or above grade level?
Yes, sir.
What is the lighter color green that's 32%?
The 32% are students that are early on grade level. That means that they are starting to be able to master grade level standards. They're being exposed to, not only being exposed to grade level standards, but as we teach high level content, they're demonstrating mastery in that process. As they transition from early on grade level to meeting meeting above grade level, that transitions to the striped in the green.
So early on grade level is not on grade levels yet. Is that what you're saying?
It is on grade level, but there's so many different complexities. They transition through other standards that are coherent, and they spiral within that particular standard in that band.
When you predict 50%, is that based on iReady data?
It is, sir. It is based on iReady data. We wanted to make certain that we had one centralized analytic that we use to make informed decisions. We do have other monthly assessments that we see that are equally as encouraging, and at the same token, we have Achieve 3000 as well. But we have multiple data sets. But we just wanted to have one that we knew that in October 2019, the publication by iReady that really has a crosswalk and bridge consistently shows how, that we can be able to make a true prediction of where our learners may be.
And I think this is going to be a question for Jacob. Is iReady aligned to the standard, and is that a good indicator of where they're going to be?
So I'm going to be cautious in how I respond to that.
I think you're already answering. Go ahead.
If there's when you look at iReady and other different kind of progress monitoring products that are available to districts, a lot of those, and I'll use the term vendors, say that they have a predictability score that falls within a range that will be pretty reliable for the districts to rely on. I'm not a psychometrician, and I'm not going to stand here and say that I put 100% certainty that if there's a predictability score, that will be 100% alignment to the outcomes that we would see. I do think it's cautiously optimistic, but I do believe when you look at data, whether it's a predictability score that aligns to a specific outcome, if you're using the same progress monitoring system in the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, and the end of the year, you want to see trend lines moving in the right direction. Whether or not it's 100% correlated to the outcomes that we would have on our standardized assessments, are the trend lines, the data, and we got to remember that data is one indicator of student performance. The teacher is the expert and knows those students, so how are they doing on classwork? How are they coming to school every day? Are there discipline problems? There's a lot of other components that factor in the reliability of a student to be successful. But I would say for this component, if it's the same assessment that's been given every year and for the past couple of years, are the trend lines moving in the direction that we want them to see or not? And I would compare that data against itself versus trying to correlate it to a specific summative assessment outcome, because these are designed more to be a formative assessment.
One more question. As far as the external operators go, I mean, we're seeing astronomical amounts of money handed out to these external operators. What kind of minimum qualifications or do external operators have to have?
So at the very least, we expect them to have a proven track record of success, meaning that they have worked in the turnaround space before. And external operators, I would still say, is relatively new to the state of Florida. When we look at the great actions that this state board has taken to ensure that our most fragile schools are getting the supports they need. We have definitely identified that some external operators are performing or having better success than others. When you look at the cost or the breakdown of how much of an investment a school is willing to make, a lot of time those details are what is the level of commitment of that external operator. And when you look at that contract, how much time are they going to spend on site? What are they doing as far as the day-to-day process to ensure that high quality instruction is happening? And I can tell you, I've had a chance to visit these schools, and we asked these questions. Superintendent Davis was generous, where I literally just called him one day. I was like, I'm in Tampa. I'm going to go by, I think it was Oak Park, unannounced, and Chair Tuck happened to be with me. And so we walked around, and one of the first questions we asked the principal, unsolicited, do you see a difference with this, with MGT now as an external operator versus the other ones, and what specifically are those differences? And the principal right away was able to say they are on site. In fact, they have a space. There is somebody that is in this office almost every single day, and they're working with teachers hands-on directly. So when you look at the layer of services, I think sometimes that's reflected in the cost, but it is definitely a big investment for the districts, but it's also a big investment to ensuring these students' success and outcomes.
Chair Tuck.
Mr. Gibson.
Just following up on your comment, Chair, and I don't want to, I know you're, Jacob, you're not an iReady spokesperson, but we're putting a lot of trust obviously in this. Am I right to assume that iReady as a product is independent of the external operator?
I would say that's a fair statement, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Petty, did you have a question?
Just to follow up on that, I think on that point, so the indicators, and this may be for the superintendent, but the indicators are in the right direction. I'm just concerned about the speed with which we're getting to better. Are there plans for taking advantage of summer to accelerate some of this? Because, again, we're in a situation where we're trying to get this school, but these kids have lost 2 or 3 years
Absolutely.
that they should have had that they didn't get. So what are we doing to get them back to where they need to be?
Absolutely. There's no days off in Hillsborough County related to summer learning. We are going to put in, we are committed to $15+ million to service over 17,000 students. And we will start on next Monday. We've done a really nice job recruiting students who qualify. In the first time in Hillsborough County, historically, we've only offered summer school to 3rd and 4th grade. We're doing K through 5 in elementary, and we're doing 6 through 12. We have so much that we have to be able to address, being very intentional about who we hire, who we engage, what curriculum will be used, what that framework will look like, what field experiences will be engaged into, so make certain that it is truly one that truly signifies that we're here to help children so that we can really address the unfinished learning that took place last year and this year.
But specifically Foster and Oak Park.
Foster, okay.
Correct?
Yes, and I also like to, I'm Shay McCrae. I'm the Chief of Transformation. Nice to meet you all. We also had 17 Saturday sessions. We took advantage of our GEAR dollars, our CARES dollars, and we were able to get in 17 full-day Saturday sessions. That included Oak Park and Foster. So part of that acceleration, again, what you'll see in most of our grade calculation, majority of the points are going to be in our growth points because we're trying to pull kids that are 2 and 3 years behind up towards grade level proficiency. You're not going to get there in 1 year. That takes time, but the opportunity to gain those growth points are there because they are so many years behind. So the bulk of those points are going to be coming from our growth points. Yeah.
Thank you. Superintendent, I got another question.
Yes, sir.
In regards to the prices you're paying to the external operators, I see that like one went up. Cost is going up this year, but they're losing over 10% of the students. What reasoning do they have for raising their price when they've got less students?
So one of the things we've been working with the state to be able to make certain that there's consistency in pricing. In last year's contract, there was differentiations per school because different schools have different complexities with number of students that are not on grade level. And so what we did this year was make certain that we had a consistent price in every one of our schools. So, you'll see that one school went up, but the services that we've asked for additional services as well to make certain that we have continued additional specialists and coaches on site. So while there may be an elevation in overall when one school or the next school, when you look at all 8 schools or these particular schools, these 2 particular schools, this pricing will stay the same for our district for the 8-school overarching contract that will be taken to the board next week.
I know that the prediction that you had is 50%. When will you have a hard number on that, or is that a?
I think, I don't want to speak for Mr. Jake, I think it's like late July.
Late July.
Yeah, I'd like to know that.
I mean, I just want to see if the
Get my
50% holds true. You know, I mean, that's a huge jump.
So
in
if the board remembers, throughout this year, we've extended compassion and grace with districts, and one of those elements that we needed to give districts the flexibility in is through our testing windows. So those windows were expanded. Kind of the rule of thumb that I use is if we expand the testing windows by 3 weeks, we can expect the results to be late in returning 3 weeks. And I can promise you, our assessment folks are working as fast as they can to turn around these results. I'm optimistic that we'll be able to have 3rd grade results soon. Typically they come in before the end of the school year because we have the 3rd grade reading camps that they use that data around. And as districts are planning the summer, we have that sense of urgency. But likely by the end of July, we'll have the rest of our data in, and we can always ask for updates and provide updates then to see what that correlation is and if we are moving in the right direction.
Were you going to say something?
Yes, sir. So I know the 50 is tall, but I will tell you from looking at all the analytics that we've done internally and other measures, we will have double-digit gains at this particular school.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, Commissioner, do you have a recommendation?
I recommend approval.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
So move. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. Won't let you down.
Find my spot here, hold on. You're still up.
Am I recognized, Chair?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the next item that we're going to talk about today is an update to our required instruction planning and reporting rule. And we have received lots of comment from the public, and I met some of our friends, I think, that are in the audience here today last night when we did some public forums. So I think it's important for us as we start to talk about the rule, because some of the common themes that we've heard from our comments is exactly what we agree with when we look at why do we want to put some of these conditions and explanations around in our rule. It's very important for our classrooms and our school districts to be a safe place that fosters an environment that really allows every student to think critically for themselves. And one of the quotes or themes that we often hear is it's important for us, or even imperative, that we teach students how to think, not specifically what to think. And that's what happens when we support that, what I like to call the Socratic method. We should have debate in our classrooms. We should have students looking at topics, talking about multiple perspective, multiple points of view. And then at the end of the day, those students have an opportunity to form and build upon their own opinions on how they believe certain topics will relate to them in life, and even particularly in person. What we want to make sure that we do is make sure that the adults in the room, or a teacher, and I'll use the term, may go rogue and say to students unfactual truths about certain historical events, and tell students that they have to believe exactly what I'm saying and standing in front of you as a classroom, and you're allowed to have your independent thought on your own. And that's something that doesn't happen a lot in our classrooms, but unfortunately there are incidences where we may have somebody present some false truths as a narrative in a classroom. So we want to be cautious around what is it when we're looking at required instruction. So when we look at what are we doing with amending this rule, the state of Florida has standards that we want to be taught, and we have required instruction topics that are outlined in Florida Statute 1003.42. When we look at these required instructional topics that are reflected in our standards, When we design lessons, our teachers are our experts in our classrooms. When they design lessons for their students to meet and demonstrate mastery on those standards, they have the autonomy and freedom to use their textbooks or bring in ancillary or supplemental materials to help make those lessons come alive and meet the needs of the students and the learners in their classroom. What we're asking is that if you're bringing in materials or designing lessons on specific topics that are required in law, that they be aligned with our standards, because those standards set the benchmark for what we want students to know and learn at each grade level and at each subject area. When we talk about why is standards-based instruction important, that's not a new topic. In fact, the standards first started in the state of Florida. We adopted the Sunshine State Standards in 1996. That also started our accountability on how are we going to measure whether or not students are meeting those standards. And some of us may remember the FCAT, the Florida Comprehensive Assessment Test. Well, once those standards aren't written, they're not set in stone forever. They should be reviewed and reflected upon in the department, and this board has gone through that. The first set of the Sunshine State Standards were in place for almost a decade before we updated them to the next generation Sunshine State Standards. We've recently updated our English language arts and math standards that the board took action on, and we're continuing to do standards revisions. In fact, we're planning to come to the board on July 14th for some additional reflections on standards, because we want to make sure they're right and that they reflect what we expect our students to know and learn. When we develop those standards, they're developed with our Florida experts and our Florida content experts to make sure that they're accurate. When we look at required instruction, planning, and reporting, that is not a new concept to this board. In fact, under Commissioner Corcoran's leadership, he has taken action in very recent years to have districts report to us as a state agency, how are we making sure that our required statute topics are being taught faithfully and dutifully and professionally, and we are able to start collecting that data. What this rule does is continue with making sure that when we teach these standards, they're done with professionalism, dutifully, and faithfully, and properly aligned. With that, I'll entertain any questions.
Okay, the way we'll start off is I'll entertain a motion in a second, then we're going to go to public comment, and then we'll bring it back to the board for questions from the board. So do I have a motion from a board member?
I'll make the motion to approve the rule.
So moved.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Okay, now we'll go to public comment. And let me say, the board has already received all the written comments from the public on this proposed rule. As a reminder, please address the board with respect and civility. We have over 30 comments so far, so each person is going to have 2 minutes. As I said earlier today, that's 2 minutes and stop. When the red light goes off, please don't make me look rude and have to stop you. Please stop on the red light. You'll have 30 seconds when you see the yellow light go off to finish up your thoughts. So if I could, I'm going to call the first person up and the next 3 people to be on deck so we can keep the meeting moving rather quickly. So Kathy Boehm is number 1, and then behind her is Marta Marcano, Stanley Scott, and Karen Hiltz.
Chair, quick question. Are we going to be able to ask Jacob questions?
We're going to, once public comment is done, then I'm going to bring it back to the board, and the board will take it from there.
Okay, thank you.
Go. All right.
Thank you, Chair Tuck. Board members, I'm Kathy Boehm, representing the Florida Education Association. We believe you value education and the role educators play in teaching our children. Otherwise, there wouldn't just not be so much interest in this rule. We made 2 written recommendations, and I believe you have them there. But just to summarize, in Part A, we suggest you add more significantly historical events that are specifically mentioned in statute under required instruction, and in the same section include the Bill of Rights and the constitutional amendments, which reflect our maturing ideas about a more diverse America than the one our founding fathers lived in. In Parent C, We suggest you remove the word indoctrinate from the description of teaching practices. And the reason is that we believe that sentence now suggests that indoctrination is okay in the state standards. And we do not believe an uncritical acceptance of belief where role and duty of an educator is to faithfully and efficiently present facts without distortion. No matter what standards we are charged with teaching, the principles of professional conduct state we shall not unreasonably restrain a student from independent action in pursuit of learning, or shall not unreasonably deny a student access to diverse points of view. The job of educators is to challenge students with facts and allow them to question and think critically about information, and that's the antithesis of indoctrination. No matter our color, background, or zip code, we want our kids to have an education that imparts honesty about who we are, integrity in how we treat others, and courage to do what's right. We urge you to amend the rule or leave it as is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marta Marcano.
Thank you, everyone, for giving me this opportunity. As a director of Protect Our Children Project organization here in Duval County, our mission is to empowering local communities through education and providing resources to protect our children's future. Our children's innocence is being exposed to agendas like sexual, political, and other key areas. I'm here to stand today in favor of our children of Jacksonville, teachers and parents, that most of them don't know what's happening in their school and their communities. We're here to be a voice of equality, because God made us equal. And what we expect is that the school educational teach respect to each other. We are not agree with the critical racial theory that has been around our educational curriculum for more than 40 years. I think God say that we have to love each other as we love ourselves. And as a faith-based organization, we need to start in our school.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Stanley Scott.
Can you step up to the mic?
The mic, yes. I'm familiar with microphones, 20 years in entertainment business. Stanley Scott with the African American Economic Recovery Think Tank. We have we have a short meeting here as far as my time to speak. But why are we here? Because ethics, equity, and doing the right thing. The history of Florida education system has been racist from zero up to now. When are we going to do the right thing? And now, when we talk about critical thinking, at this time, we should have this class. Because I know for a fact, and as the founder of the African American Economic Recovery Think Tank, we are a nationwide organization and a business, that we have a lot of racism in this city, from the top to the bottom. So people act like races disappear. No, it's still here. At the present time, from our research, African Americans get 53 cents on every dollar earned. I mean, it is regression. Why is that? Now, in 2000, we was getting 83 cents on the dollar compared to a Caucasian. Why is that? You got a problem with education. But y'all sit here and y'all like this is not happening, but it is. It continue to happen, especially to the African American community. And no matter what we have done, I'm an ex-military, Vietnam vet. I gave my life for this country. But when it comes to equity, we are still dealing with these problems today. Why? Because of leadership. Racist leadership continue to do the same thing over and over.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Karen Hiltz. And after Karen Hiltz, if Michael Anderson, Dr. Maria Pirro, and Elgin Foreman, if you would come up and be on deck. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Commissioner and board members. I'm Karen Hiltz from Indian River County, and I have concerns with regards to this rule from the perspective that it doesn't have enough breadth or oversight to ensure children will not be indoctrinated based on Marxist theories being used as we currently speak. Not only are the publishers using CRT language such as social emotional learning, civic engagement, culturally responsive teaching, equity, and more, but the authors and advisors to these publishers are steeped in Marxist training, and many hold equity and diversity positions in academia. This is and should be unacceptable to all legislators, parents, and persons working within the education system. In addition, teachers they're attending training such as Courageous Conversations, written by Glenn Singleton. His webpage clearly represents and reflects his biased attitude and approach. Simply look at the table of contents at his book. Another program to train teachers is Conscious Discipline, which promotes SEL, social and emotional learning, and has a CASEL Select Program designation. Conscious Discipline also claims they meet Biden administration priorities, which includes equity in education. Based on the above information, I appeal to your better instincts to direct a timeout or pause for adopting new curriculum for this coming year. Our primary objective is to ensure students are taught the truth about our constitutional republic, not just in civics and history, but in every subject. We want them to understand the sacrifices that were made, to value the uniqueness of the gifts God has blessed us with, and to continue to be the light that shines for freedom around the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Anderson.
Good morning. My name is Michael Anderson. So for the 6A rule that is basically going to be voted on today, I have several issues when it comes to the standards of disabilities issues here in the state of Florida. I have a product of the Florida education system. I've been enrolled in the ESE classrooms all of my life. I was diagnosed at a birth with a mild case of cerebral palsy and a developmental delay. I am the only living person of my graduating elementary school class here in Duval County. I am the only living person left. So again, when it comes to these standards, when it comes to teachers, like like Amy Donofrio here in Duval County, like several other teachers here who actually care about their students and are actually building a future for them, who are helping them. Again, there are several issues here today that again definitely need to be addressed. And again, when it comes to the critical thinking and obviously different perspectives, we have folks here in the state legislator who have different opinions. But again, Black Lives Matter.
Dr. Maria Pirro.
Hello. I'm a teacher in Miami-Dade County Public Schools, and I am here in support of this rule. I was born in Cuba, and I was raised there under socialism. And I can tell you firsthand the experience that I had there in Cuba. I could tell that the textbooks that we've had here in Florida under Common Core, they are indoctrinating our children. Thank God for Ron DeSantis, who decided to do away with it. However, unless you pass this rule, the leftist radical school board members who just want to teach critical race theory to our children, who want to indoctrinate them, they will find a way, they will find a backdoor to be able to teach this. I'm going to give you one example in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. They are offering a PD over the summer. The name of the PD is called Make Your Classroom a Place for Social Justice Advocacy. It teaches critical race theory. It is offering a stipend and master plan points for teachers to get certifications. And this is just a backdoor way to actually implement this. If you pass this rule today, then the school board members and the superintendent will not be able to implement curriculum that does not align with these standards. So I support it 100%, and do this for our nation, do it for our kids and for future generations. We do not want to live in a country like Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua. That is not what I came for. That is not what my parents came for. My dad was a political prisoner in Cuba, and we suffered, and many countries have suffered under socialism and this type of voodoo, whatever it is, curriculum.
Thank you, Dr. Pirro. Elgin Foreman.
Good morning.
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 My name is Elgin Foreman. I live in Duval County. I'm a retired veteran. Teachers should be allowed to teach the truth, period. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. All right, the next batch here will be Mike Ludwig, Kevin Baird, Bobby O'Connor, and Keisha King. Keisha King, I'm sorry.
Good morning. My name is Mike Ludwig, and I am a proud member of the Northside Coalition of Jacksonville. I would like to share the words of Jake Silverstein, the editor-in-chief of the New York Times Magazine, who responded to the critiques of the 1619 Project mentioned by Governor DeSantis this morning. These are his words. The work of various historians supports the contention that the uneasiness among slaveholders in the colonies about the growing anti-slavery sentiment in Britain and increasing imperial regulation helped motivate the revolution. One made episode that these and other historians refer to as the landmark 1772 decision of the British High Court in Somerset versus Stuart. The case concerned a British customs agent named Charles Stuart, who bought an enslaved man named Somerset and planned to sell him and ship him to Jamaica, only for the Chief Justice, Lord Mansfield, to declare this unlawful because chattel slavery was not supported by English common law. It is true that the Somerset decision did not legally threaten slavery in the colonies, but the ruling nevertheless caused a sensation nonetheless. Multiple historians have pointed out, in part because of the Somerset case, slavery joined other issues in helping to gradually drive apart the Patriots and their colonial governments. The British often tried to undermine the Patriots by mocking their hypocrisy in fighting for liberty while keeping Africans in bondage. The culmination of this was the Dunmore Proclamation issued by the governor of Virginia in late 1775, which offered freedom to any enslaved person who fled his plantation to join the British Army. A member of the South Carolina's delegation to the Continental Congress wrote that this act did more to sever the ties between Britain and its colonies, quote, than any other expedient which could have been thought of, unquote. And yet how many contemporary Americans have even heard of it? My final words are teachers should be allowed to teach the truth, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Thank you.
Kevin Baird.
Hi, my name is Kevin Baird. I'm a pastor. I've been a college professor. I'm also the director of pastoral ministries for the Florida Family Policy Council. We represent literally thousands of pastors across the state, and I am a supporter of the proposed amendment. We appreciate our teachers and their commitment to students. However, there are areas of study, such as history, that are not always neat and tidy and without numerous aspects of context. History has interpretation, and interpretation is oftentimes the birthplace of personal agendas and biases. It is simply common sense for teachers to be reminded that their job is that of education and not indoctrination, to facilitate discussion and not proselytization. For example, I have 2 graduate degrees in history, and I tend to look at history providentially, which means that I believe that I see God's providence at work all through history. Unsurprisingly, I'm committed to it. But as a teacher in the public sphere, my interpretive method would find significant pushback from various groups in the community. And so the point is, when we come to teaching in the public arena, that facts are facts, and that is what needs emphasis. Not an interpretive method like critical race theory or intersectionality that pushes a current ideological, political, or personal bias. We appreciate your support of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baird. Bobby O'Connor.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Critical race theory examines the ways in which race and racism influence our nation. It argues that historical patterns of racism are ingrained in law and institutions, that the legacies of slavery, segregation, and Jim Crow still create an uneven playing field for black people. I say to you, this is not just a theory. It is the plain and simple truth, and I believe that students should be told the truth. The proposed amendment that you all are looking at requires that teachers define American history based on standards in the Declaration of Independence. I, for one, don't want the Declaration of Independence taught verbatim without some critical thinking. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Well, there's a lie right there. At that time in our history, in our nation, black people were property, and they weren't even considered to be people. I don't understand why we just can't teach the truth and let students develop their own ideas. Isn't that what education is? Governor DeSantis said, and I quote, "Students deserve the best education we can provide, and that means giving them a true picture of their world and our shared history as Americans." But on the other hand, it seems to me that what he is proposing and what you all are considering is to not tell the truth, but whitewash it. Hiding facts does not change them. Give students the whole truth. The FEA says that efforts by DeSantis are a political ideology, not based on education. James Baldwin said so clearly, not everything can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. Please face the truth and vote for it on July the 14th. Include critical race theory. Don't censor our teachers. Don't create falsehoods. The students and the teachers deserve better than that from you. Please vote for the truth.
Thank you. Keisha King.
Good morning. Thank you for having me speak. My name is Keisha King. I'm a mom of two, one who's in the Duval County Public School System and one in private school thanks to school choice. I'm also a member of Moms for Liberty, representing thousands of parents. Just coming off of May 31st, marking the 100 years of the Tulsa riots, it is sad that we are even contemplating something like critical race theory, where children will be separated by their skin color and deemed permanently oppressors or oppressed in 2021. That is not teaching the truth, unless you believe that whites are better than blacks. I have personally heard teachers teaching CRT, and we have had an assembly shut down because Duval County Public School System consultant thought it would be a great idea to separate students by race. This is unacceptable. CRT is not racial sensitivity or simply teaching unfavorable American history or teaching Jim Crow history. CRT is deeper and more dangerous than that. CRT, in its outworking today, is a teaching that there is a hierarchy in society where white, male, heterosexual, able-bodied people are deemed the oppressor, and anyone else outside of that status is oppressed. That's why we see corporations like Coca-Cola asking their employees to be less white, which is ridiculous. I don't know about you, but telling my child or any child that they are in a permanent oppressed status in America because they are black is racist, and saying that white people are automatically above me, my children, or any child is racist as well. This is not something that we can stand for in our country. And don't take it from me, look at the writers of these types of publications. Our ancestors, white, black, and others hung, bled, and died right alongside each other to push America towards that more perfect union. If this continues, we will look back and be responsible for the dismantling of the greatest country in the world by reverting to teaching hate and that race is a determining factor on where your destiny lies. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, if I could have Aaron DeFietro, Grace May, Hope McMath, and Ari Ivory.
Thank you. It has been said that he who controls the education of children determines the future, and there are few areas more fundamental to education than the teaching of history. Hence, I stand here to support the action point 7 and the proposed changes. Critical race theory and the related concept of intersectionality views life through the lens of power structures, the oppressed versus the oppressors. It teaches that your group identity determines your destiny. In essence, you're not free. You are a slave to your group identity. The problem with this ideology is it does not reflect real history. We are not a carbon copy of our group stereotype. We are unique individuals created in the image of God and endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, with a unique destiny, not determined by some societal construct in the mind of an armchair philosopher. Martin Luther King Jr., Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, and Harriet Tubman are all examples of individuals who rose above their circumstances by God's grace in spite of the opposition around them. They are the spirit of America. Critical race theory teaches that depending on the amount of melanin in one's skin, children are either deemed to be permanently oppressed, weak, and unable to advance and succeed in society, or on the other hand are intrinsically born as racist with no hope of change or redemption that are inclined to exert power and oppress all others. This is the ideology of the KKK and their allies. It is unthinkable to me that we would allow such dangerous and racist ideology in our taxpayer-funded schools. There have been great evils in our nation's history, and as much as I love my country, there are many problems that exist today. These sins must be taught to our children lest we forget history and are doomed to repeat it. But our tainted past does not change the fact that we are still the greatest nation in world history. The question we have before us is, what will we teach our children about the nature of who we are? Will we judge one another by the color of our skin, as critical race theory demands we must? Or will we, with Dr. King, judge one another by the content of our character? Thank you.
Thank you. Grace May. Grace May.
Hi, I'm an 8th grade student in Duval County, and I would like to share with you a life experience that explains why I think critical race theory should be implemented in the classroom. In 4th grade, my mom took me to a community meeting held by 90 Forward. That meeting discussed race theory. At this event, they were giving out race cards. Essentially, these cards asked questions creating a conversation around race. The next day, I brought these cards into school and placed them on my teacher's desk. At the end of the day, I walked up to my teacher, and I was so excited to ask her what she thought of the cards. When I asked her about the cards, she sent them to the principal's office because they were inappropriate and told me that if I wanted them, I would have to go and collect them myself. I was heartbroken. I was so excited about sharing my cards, and instead of embracing the cards, she saw this conversation as a threat. We need critical race theory in the classrooms, period. When people are too afraid to have the conversation, how will we ever progress? Teaching students about critical race theory takes away the fear factor and creates a safe space for conversation. If we know better, we do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Hope McMath.
Good morning. I want to actually start this with a quick land acknowledgement and recognize the fact that we are all gathered on land that once belonged to the Timucua and the Creek. We are also 1 block away from where Willie Washington was lynched in the 1920s. We're 4 blocks away from where Axe Handle Saturday took place, which was an extreme act of white violence against black bodies during the civil rights movement. We are also in an area where 43% of our population in 1860 were enslaved people. Those facts matter. They're part of our history and American history, but they cannot be taught without also having space for the discussion of racism. And we know that when we help students identify and critique the causes of social inequality, we will finally step closer to a world where equity is possible. Teaching the truth of systemic racism and its impact across time is an important step in solving our largest problems. And it's messy, and it's uncomfortable, and it's challenging, as it always is when we try hard to lift the blinders off of our eyes. What you are proposing will create a chilling and damaging effect. And who will be most harmed are young people. Racism is absolutely woven into the fabric of our nation's history and life. It just is. It's a fact. And the most productive way in which to reckon with that fact so that we might create a future where all people are valued is to speak truth in our schools. And remember, when we are not speaking truth, that means we are lying. Thank you.
Ari Ivory.
Hello, my name is Ari. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm representing the organization Black Voters Matter. My opinion, put simply, is this. You cannot equip students as critical thinkers by continuing to mask the oppressive systems that keep marginalized people in an orbit of micro/macro aggressions, high mortality rates, lack of generational wealth, unfair wages, racist stereotypes, and so on and so forth. If the goal is to ensure Florida students have the highest quality civics education courses throughout the nation, we need multiple frameworks that help us understand how race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, class, gender identity, disability, etc. tie into how institutions treat people throughout history and even now. In order to challenge systems of oppression that hold everybody back, we must be able to identify them, not mask them with like weird lies or whitewashing. I say weird lies because this takes me back to a time in kindergarten. A lot of people have this experience. It's very weird. It's when we dress up as Native Americans and play out the natives meeting the colonizers for the first time. They were so nice. And it's like, why are we taught that Christopher Columbus was so nice when he was a murderer? Why are we taught that George Washington had wooden teeth when he actually had teeth made of slave teeth? It's like teaching us these weird things that when we grow up, we see that, wow, this was completely a lie. Why was this taught? You know? And my whole life was spent in Brevard County public schools, and that was not a time of validation. All my teachers always skimmed over racism. Racism is real. Sexism is real. Homophobia is real. And we need to talk about this. We need to talk about this, or else it's just going to keep getting worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next batch, Kevin Parker, Peter Gibson, Martin Janowicki, and Chris Kierman. So Kevin Parker.
Board. I'm Kevin Parker from Osceola County, and I'm representing everyone who couldn't be here today to express their thoughts. I'm glad Ron DeSantis brought up the Project 1619, because now we know why we're here. The amendment is about racism. It's about not teaching the gritty parts of our history. It's about avoiding the hard conversation for the sake of white fragility. We will not allow you to call our history inaccurate or fake news because you can't handle the truth. You talk about the indoctrination. You're indoctrinating children when they're not being taught the entire story. How you call that critical thinking? You can't. The soul of this country is its history, every deep, dark, and bloody moment of it. Black history is American history. We will not let you erase our history because it makes you uncomfortable. Allow critical race theory to be taught because you can't know where you're going without knowing where you've been. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Gibson.
My name is Peter Gibson, resident of Atlantic Beach and retired. We've heard some very compelling testimony today. I don't have anything significant to add. I think we can basically endorse the FEA's position. I've heard a lot said about critical race theory. Based on what I've heard from many of the commentaries, there needs to be more education in critical race theory because very few people know what it is. And I saw it nowhere in the standards. But again, I think that the most important thing is that let teachers teach, let facts speak for themselves, and teach the facts, teach the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Martin Janowicki. If I butchered the name, I apologize.
Hi, thank you. My name is Martin Janowicki. I'm in St. Johns County. And what I would like to say is that I do support your approving the amendment. I believe critical race theory is nothing more than cultural Marxism. It attempts to separate society into a group of oppressors and the oppressed. And the solution from CRT is to simply destroy the institutions of our country and replace them with whatever the people that control the narrative deem to be best for the people that they want to rule over. It promotes racial essentialism, collective guilt, and neo-segregation. And I would tell you it's arguably illegal because it goes against the First Amendment, which protects against compelled speech. It probably violates the 14th Amendment, which is the Equal Protection Amendment, and it likely violates the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits institutions from discriminating based upon race. And our schools should aim at excellence and not focus on the flavor of the day, which today seems to be CRT. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Janowicki. Chris Kierman.
Hi there, I'm Chris Kiernan, and I'm here to just kind of bring things together. People are here talking about critical race theory. I'm a product of Pinellas County Schools. The critical race theory that would have been included in that curriculum was absolutely dreadful. And I went to school, almost an all-black school, okay? Black and brown students don't even learn about their own history. This is a problem. Critical race theory is here so we can have critical thinking skills. Our children can come together, have conversations about things. The people here coming up talking about, indoctrination and things, but essentially what they're saying is that what they're going to learn in school, they're going to be indoctrinated with, right? So then we need to take out sex ed, because that means that all of our children are going to go and have sex and have children, right? Early. So why do we have sex ed, right? We have sex ed so that people are educated on sex. They're educated so they know what to do to prevent a baby, right? So if we take out critical race theory out of our students' rooms, what we're doing is we're saying this conversation is bad. And that is not the case. The conversation is not bad. The history may be pretty awful, but the conversation is not bad. I implore you guys to just really think about this for a moment. There's a lot of people that have come up here to say that this is indoctrination, but I don't believe that. I feel like whitewashing history is not necessarily putting things in there that's not true. What it is it's taking away the part of history that we deem to be something we don't want to revere. But that's not the case. You can't do that with history. You know, the fact of the matter is that black and brown lives have not been treated equal. And we need to address that, and we need to talk about it. And by anyone saying that we should take it out and that it's not necessarily true, that's propaganda in itself. If they're not ready to face history, then they shouldn't be in power.
Thank you. Okay, the next batch will be Joe Ross, Blake Harper, Melanie Bolduck, and Linnell Philmon. Joe Ross. Is Joe Ross here?
I am Joe Ross, born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida. I would like to let you know my opinion about critical race theory. It is a truth-based study and examination of historic events and factual that have influenced race relations in the past, present, and will dictate our future path forward. Our education system and the learning environment provided for our youth must be based on facts, truth, and nothing but the truth. Please allow our teachers, our educators, the ability to tell the truth, to be based on facts, no matter how good, bad, or ugly. We feel that our young people need the opportunity to utilize and develop critical thinking. Critical race theory will provide a framework to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Blake Harper.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here in Jacksonville. You are coming on the heels of a very sad turn of events with the name change of the schools. If you look at that process, you understand just exactly what the corruption and the fraudulent nature of critical race theory is. Antonio Gramsci was an Italian communist. When you think of critical anything theory, it was his idea, critical theory. And the notion of critical theory is that your personal experiences trump fact. So what happens is that when somebody says that I'm a black person, or I'm a brown person, or I'm a white person, and my facts are what they are, then you don't have any way to respond to this. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're taking this whole notion of racial difference and saying, because I'm of a specific color of skin, your facts don't matter. Your facts don't matter. And the bottom line is, when you start looking at the facts, I was born in 1958. Manning Johnson was a black man. He wrote a book called Color, Communism, and Common Sense. Read it. Think about what happened 63 years ago. Think about the black and white world that it was then versus what it is today. Folks, they want to take this country back to a time when we've invested a lot of time and effort, all of us have, every one of us have, to work on this issue. And we've made great progress, and you can see that. So in looking at this ordinance and looking at this proposal, which I support, you have to take a look at what the schools are producing in terms of their ability to read at grade level. This is not a matter of where a fraction of 100% will be acceptable. We're talking about protecting the future of our country, protecting the republic. You have to put in place the proper oversight and disciplinary mechanisms to make sure that critical race theory is shut down and people are penalized. Thank you.
Melody Boldock.
Good morning. Thank you for listening. I'm a mother of two. My name is Melody Bolduke. I'm a pastor. I'm a veteran teacher of 21 years. And I'm also a Florida business owner and taxpayer. And I'm here with all of those interests. As a first-year teacher here in Duval County, I literally cried with pride for my students when I showed up that first day and an African American at table, because those were the appropriate words to use at the time. We had, it moved me to see that, and I told them how proud I was. My last year in the public school system, I had a young lady who came in and said she couldn't talk to this boy because he was a light skin and she was a dark skin. And I said, "Who told you that?" She said, "That's the way it is." And that was the culture that was being perpetuated by the music she listened to, by the entertainment on TV, and in their own homes. And that's the institution I'm concerned about. In schools, the purpose of education is to take away that victim mentality, to get rid of the legacy of bitterness and resentment. And the worst thing we can teach children is they're victims rather than overcomers. The best way to keep children from reaching their full potential in modern society is to teach them they're victims, that education is not valuable, and that they shouldn't respect or trust authority. With regards to everyone who doesn't look like them, to look for hidden demons, think they can't trust people or truly be known by anyone who isn't their skin color, and the public shaming of children who have not repeated the sins of their ancestors is my concern about a hallmark of CRT. It leaves no reasonable discourse. It has us looking for hidden racism that is reminiscent of the Spanish Inquisition, the reign of Bloody Mary, the Salem witch trials, even the World War II internment camps in the McCarthy era.
Linnell Philmon.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Linnell Philman, President of League of Women Voters, Jacksonville First Coast. The League of Women Voters remains committed to a free public school system for Florida with high standards for student achievement and with equality of education opportunity for all that is financed adequately by the state through an equitable funding formula. In support of that, the League encourages the Board of Education to require that instruction on the required topics be factual and objective and not suppress or distort significant historical events. Instruction on the Holocaust, slavery, and Jim Crow laws should be taught in a manner that leads to an understanding of the ramifications of prejudice, racism, and stereotyping, and an examination of what it means to be a responsible and respectful person for the purposes of encouraging tolerance of diversity in a pluralistic society. There is not a single topic that can be taught in our public schools with any level of accuracy without addressing our nation's shortcomings and growth in the areas of race, sex, gender, and class. We look forward to the courageous decision the board will make on the governor's proposed rule and their support in providing our students with an education that encourages them both academically and civically. And separately, on a note just from myself, I attended public school here in Florida where I was indoctrinated, since that's the catchword today, since I was indoctrinated in the lost cause vice historical facts about the Civil War. It would take my 27-and-a-half-year Navy career to unpack all of that and find truth. I think our students today deserve better. Thank you.
Okay, Wells Todd, I think that is, Connell Crooms, Ben Frazier, and Susan Ertker.
My name is Wells Todd. I'm with Take 'em Down Jacks, Veterans for Peace, and Jacksonville Progressive Coalition. This proposal is Trumpism, It's racist, and it's keeping this country divided. In the 60s, this is the same thing that happened when the African American community demanded that African American experience be taught in our schools. DeSantis glanced over history in his presentation this morning. Slavery lasted 246 years. He left out Reconstruction and the violent way it was overthrown. He left out the fact that there were over 1,000 black elected officials during Reconstruction. He left out the black codes. He left out the massacres that were carried out against the African American communities. He left out the terror lynching period. He left out the people that were lynched just because they wanted to vote. He left out 100 years of segregation. He left out the assassination of African Americans who fought for equality. DeSantis and his cronies are old-style Dixiecrats. This move to censor teachers in our schools dates back to the United Daughters of the Confederacy and the propaganda of the Lost Cause. The Daughters censored all Southern history. If it didn't celebrate the Confederacy, it did not get into the history books. While they were pushing the philosophy of white supremacy, African Americans were being lynched by the hundreds. Our neighborhoods were being burnt to the ground. I want to say this. Teaching the facts will bring the country together, not divide the country. And the only reason that I can see that y'all don't want that to happen is because you're ashamed of the history. And I don't see a black member up here.
Thank you, Mr. Todd. Connell Crooms.
Good morning. My name is Connell Crooms. I don't have remarks prepared, so you are going to get a little bit of the real. It's going to make you uncomfortable, and you should be uncomfortable. I'm here today because I've heard so much about, critical race theory. It's been a little bit over a decade since I've graduated high school. And I heard about this meeting, the board was meeting in Jacksonville talking about the governor, his position on critical race theory. And I'm asking my friends, what is that? What is that? Come to find out, it's teaching what most of us know as the truth. And it's apparent that the governor and the Board of Education has a problem with the truth. You know what? We need more of that. Teach me more truth. Teach me more about the struggles of the struggle for liberation of my forefathers. Teach me the fact that if Florida had more lynchings than any other state, teach me the fact that when the Black Panther Party created the free breakfast program, and the reasons why they did so is because of poverty. Teach me the inequalities of America. Teach me what it means to be black in America. Don't cover up the truth. We need more critical race theory if that's what it means, teaching the truth. We need more of that in schools, not less. So this debate of whether or not, whether it's politicalization, not teaching the truth is politicalization. There's no one politicalizing children's education but the governor and his Board of Education. Teach the truth, don't obfuscate the truth. Thank you.
Ben Frazier.
Hello, my name is Ben Frazier. I'm the founder and president of the Northside Coalition of Jacksonville. I've heard somewhere that there are 3 sides to every story. Your side, my side, and the truth. Well, now, Governor DeSantis has designed a special plan. That plan is to brainwash public school students in the state of Florida. That's his side. We strongly criticize this proposal. It's an effort to whitewash, cover up, and candy coat history. It seeks to prevent teachers from teaching the truth about slavery, racism, and other racial matters. It is, in fact, a Republican political propaganda campaign. It's directed by the governor. He's using the education system as a launching pad for his presidential political aspirations. Yes, sir, I'm here to tell you that teachers should be encouraged to tell the truth about history, the tale of tales that killed 4,000 Native Americans, the Muskogee, the Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw. This board should stop attempting to sanitize and to clear up the ugly horrors of history that make white folks feel uncomfortable. I'm here to tell you that Adolf Hitler didn't want the truth told, and guess what? Neither does Ron DeSantis. Benito Mussolini didn't want it told, and guess what? Neither does Ron DeSantis. White supremacists don't want it told. And we're here to tell you that it's time to allow teachers to tell the truth. This is a deliberate plan to politicize and whitewash history.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser.
Stop it.
Susan Ericker.
We say teach.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser.
Allow teachers to teach the truth.
Your time is up. Thank you.
Allow teachers to teach the truth. 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 Allow teachers
Could somebody
to teach
please
the
remove
truth.
Mr.
Allow
Fraser?
teachers to teach the truth.
Okay, Sue, go ahead, ma'am.
Allow teachers to teach the truth.
If you,
Allow teachers to teach the truth.
go ahead, Ms. Ericker.
Allow teachers to teach the truth. Allow teachers to teach the truth.
They don't stop
Allow teachers to teach the truth.
They're going to have to, but they don't.
Allow teachers to teach
Chair, should we? Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute recess because the court reporter needs it. Ma'am, Mrs. Atker, we will come to you when we come back in. Thank you.
I haven't, these are the few left I haven't crossed out state yet.
Erker, and while I got you, if Christelis Estranga, Pat Villa, and Jamie Azar will be on deck, please. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Yes, I find it interesting that a lot of the people here today have spoken about critical race theory when that term is not mentioned in this rule. Hopefully you'll come back and we'll have a debate on what that theory means. I came today to ask you to please amend the rule that's under this agenda item number 7 by changing section 3B to this wording. Instruction on the required topics must be factual and may not suppress or distort significant historical events. Instruction on the Holocaust, slavery, and Jim Crow laws should be taught in a manner that leads to an understanding of the ramifications of prejudice, racism, and stereotyping, and an examination of what it means to be a responsible and respectful person for the purposes of encouraging tolerance of diversity in a pluralistic society. That's suggestion for 3B on item 7. Also in this rule, you talk about public schools. But public schools is a very ambiguous term now. Sometimes public schools mean what I grew up thinking about as a public school, which is the neighborhood school. But now public schools sometimes means charter schools, and sometimes it means private schools. So does this rule apply to only the district-run schools, or does it also apply to charter schools? Going forward, you need to make that clear so people understand if you're making rules for only the district-run schools or for all publicly funded schools. We're giving a lot of our money away to private industry. In Jacksonville, we just had to sell surtax increase that's going to go to charter schools, and I'm worried about the money disappearing.
Thank you, ma'am. Christelis Estanga.
Hi, I'm Cristela Sestanga. I live in Leon County. As someone originally born and raised in Venezuela, I can say that the same thing happens there that happens here. We want to hide the history of the transatlantic slave trade and the eradication of indigenous communities. You can ban a categorical framework, but you cannot ban the truth and historical facts. Today, you will be making decisions to ban critical race theory, but you're not going to be able to ban the truth of our history. The only fake narrative is that one that says that teaching history is about ideology. We need to be factual, not sugarcoat things, even if that makes us uncomfortable. We cannot celebrate Martin Luther King Jr., for example, without acknowledging the fact that the US government was vehemently opposed to his beliefs and attempted to discredit the civil rights movement. This is not ideology, this is history. You cannot teach about North Florida history without talking about how Tallahassee was the center of slavery in the South, how black neighborhoods were intentionally destroyed here in Jacksonville, and how that impacts our communities to this day. This is not ideology, this is history. The only way we can work toward a more perfect union to be better is to acknowledge our faults, and that is okay. We seek to have these attributes of self-reflection, evaluation, and self-improvement as individuals. We should also have the same standard for our collective whole. It's uncomfortable, but our history has many uncomfortable points, and I just want to encourage all teachers to keep teaching the truth.
Thank you. Pat Vila.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Pat Villa, and I'm a little distracted after that, but this is my first time here. But I will say that, you know, our children are such delicate, innocent victims, and the purpose of the school is to teach them math, writing, history, things that are going to be useful so that when they grow up, they can become professionals, doctors, lawyers, or skilled, tradesmen, and everything else that everything else should be, I'm sorry.
Doing great.
The culture and morals and faith and politics are the parents' responsibilities. It's not the teachers' responsibilities to instill their opinion or what they think is truth to our children. It's the parents' right to teach them morals, what's right and wrong, what's good and bad. The teacher's responsibility is only to teach them what's supposed to be taught in school, not their opinion. And then as far as truth goes, what I keep hearing is truth. That's all subjective. You can see it in Washington. It's all subjective, what's truth and what's not truth. So I wouldn't go on what's truth, just the facts. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Villa. Jamie Azar.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm here to tell you and explain that the ban on critical race theory is unconstitutional and an unfair abuse of power. It demonstrates a lack of accountability and transparency. How can educators expect to teach history accurately without talking about race and racism? How can you discuss the civil rights movement without discussing race and racism? Banning CRT will only further promote factual inefficacies. Indoctrination is a guise to deflect accountability and for fear of redistribution of power and privilege. This amendment is systemically inequitable. If racism can't stand, as DeSantis says it can't, we must talk about history accurately. And in doing so, we cannot ignore race. We cannot promote colorblindness. Now more than ever, school must be a place where we reaffirm equity, diversity, inclusion for all students, and ensure that everyone knows that African American history is American history, LGBTQIA history is American history, Indigenous history is American history. The ban on critical race theory is not only whitewashing history, but erasing it. Let teachers teach the truth. Thank you.
Okay, Lillian Gann, Tamron Bell, and Bennett Brown for the last three.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here and for allowing this to be a public space. My name is Lillian Gann. I am a resident of St. Augustine in St. Johns County, and I'm a mother of two age school children. I am a labor and postpartum doula, and it's also my first time here. I am a first-generation American daughter of immigrants that came from Cuba, a country that does indoctrinate in their education. So I'm here to speak on point 7 as well. I did some research. Educationweek.org or edweek.org had the following to say. Critical race theory is an academic concept that is more than 40 years old. It is the core idea that racism is a social construct and that it is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in legal systems and policies. In other words, racism is much, much more than whether or not my racist uncle decides to use the N-word when he thinks he's not going to get in trouble. It is deeper than that. It's in our core systemic issues that we need to address in this country. It's a good example of which is in the 1930s when government officials literally drew lines around areas deemed poor financial risks, the places where black people lived, okay? And those policies still affect black communities in St. Augustine today. So this is speaking to what we now understand to be redlining. Sure, if we go through with point 7, my question is, could teaching about how, for example, in modern history, Drug use, despite being comparable across racial lines, the war on drugs led to a disproportionate arrest of minority groups, Latinos and blacks. What is going to happen? How do we actually teach our history without teaching the ramifications of it and how it disproportionately affects all Americans? We need this country to be equal for all. Thank you.
Tamron Bell.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Tamsin Bell, and I have 3 children in Duval County schools, high schools. And I'm speaking as a mother and for thousands of other moms and parents across the state, as well as personally. This critical race theory or equity curriculum cannot be implemented in our schools. It is anti-American and a blatant Marxist agenda to divide, not unite, and to enforce the destruction of our great nation. Let's be frank, it really seeks to destroy America as a whole. I am a descendant of Revolutionary War patriots who fought for our American independence, and to say that that part of history is false or skew it in any way is absurd and ignorant. How can you just twist history to meet your needs? Simple. It's an agenda that communists have been using for a very long time. Change or destroy history. Hitler did it. Castro did it. And many more. On one hand, I am born of patriot descendants. On the other hand, my mother fled Indonesia in 1950 when the communists came in. The evil communists wanted to execute her and the rest of her family because they were part European. They considered them white dogs, is what they called her. As an American patriot and a daughter of someone that fled evil, such as communism, I will fight, along with many more, to protect our children from this racist, Marxist indoctrination, such as critical race theory, or anything else associated with this. You have my word on this.
Okay, the last one is Bennett Brown.
Good morning. Thank you all for your service. My name is Bennett Brown. I'm from Duval County. I'm a father of 3 and a grandfather of 6. I'm a banker, community banker by trade, and I also have the honor of serving on the board of the Florida Family Policy Council. And I am in favor of the 2 amendments to Rule 6A and to prevent the teaching of critical race theory. We all know it's a Marxist tactic to divide our country by class and by race. I would encourage you and all those attending to read Rules for Radicals and to listen or watch on YouTube a documentary called Agenda 2. That's Agenda 2 on YouTube. It's a great documentary on what the Marxists are doing to our country. We ask that you teach in the schools truth about the history of our country, truth and facts, and that's good. As y'all know, our history has got good and bad and ugly, but we ought to teach the truth. And that the United States of America is a great and wonderful land with freedom for all. Please teach that. I pray for God's blessing and favor on you and your families, on our teachers, our state, and our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Okay, we got one more late arrival here. Roselle Van, I'm going to do the best I can, but you'll have to. Roselle Van Gossard.
Van Nostrand?
Okay.
You have to go to Catholic school to do that phonetic thing, I guess. How do you do? Thank you for squeaking me in here. I've been in the garden and I ran to get here. So, okay. My feelings are this is an insult to the...
Just, you only have 2 minutes. I just want to let you...
I'm fine.
Okay.
And it's not a book.
Okay.
This is an insult to the students and the community. School is about education and giving students the tools to think critically. To say CRT is indoctrination is to say everything they hear is indoctrination. Why would the government be so scared of conversations around race, our history of enslavement, Indigenous people, or any of the many different people who are our neighbors and fellow citizens? For the government to dictate curriculum is hubris, at least, and overreach in the extreme. We demand that teachers study for 4 years to get their degree to teach. Why don't we allow them to do what they are professionally trained to do? Why would the government or anyone dictate to our teachers? Is it fear, teaching them to think and ask? Let's acknowledge all our students. Let's acknowledge the many contributions people of color have made. Let's talk about race, racism, multiculturalism. America is not one race or one story. To honor all our children, we must let them know we see them and their worth. Inclusion, not exclusion. Love, not hate.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, that concludes the public comment part of this action item. So now we'll bring it back to the board and entertain any questions from the board.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom Grady. I have an amendment that I would like to offer to the board.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Initially, I'd like to say that because of our history, because of the Constitution, because of the Bill of Rights, we can have this discussion here today. We take this for granted, but it's easy to forget that in many countries around the world, we couldn't get together as a people from different walks of life and have this conversation. And that history is the subject of the rule, which I think is a good rule, and I support it. I think our board has a duty to the kids in the state of Florida. I always use as a filter what's best for the kids, which sometimes isn't what's best for the adults. But I always come down on the side of the kids. But I've listened to a lot of comments, as you all have today. Our inboxes were blowing up with comments from people, and a very, very significant number in favor and a very significant number opposed to the proposed rule. But a common theme I heard then and I heard today was that the rule doesn't say enough, that the rule needs to go further and address other topics. And my amendment would do that, Mr. Chairman. I think there were some comments also addressed to the governor, who spoke with us earlier this morning, of course, and the rule and the amendment would further his intent. But I also want to point out that the governor did make us aware that there is current Florida law on all of these subjects. So to the speaker who thought that the governor might have missed a few points, he didn't, because he incorporated specifically Florida statute section 1003.42, which folks should really read, because it is that statute that gives us the authority and creates the duty for us to adopt these rules. So my amendment, which, Mr. Chairman, I believe you have and the members of the board have, my amendment essentially does three things. First, it adds hard truths to the Holocaust that's already referenced in the proposed rule. Many people today spoke about this. Many people were concerned that we weren't going to teach the truth, or that we weren't going to teach about slavery, the Civil War, Reconstruction, the Civil Rights Movement, the contributions of women, African American and Hispanic people. All of that is now incorporated into the rule by way of my proposed amendment. And the proposed amendment, in addition, requires that we teach, once again, the truth, and teach the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and all amendments to the Bill of Rights, which, as the governor pointed out, included the 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments. Together, they're referred to as the Reconstruction Amendments. They were ratified by the states in 1868. That is a critical date in the history of our country, far more important and truthful than 1619, which is just an arbitrary date that some academics chose to make a different case about a different narrative, not the truth. Which leads to the third thing that my amendment does, Mr. Chairman, and that is to prohibit fiction, project, or theory masquerading as facts. Critical race theory is a theory. It is proposed by academics. It began with critical theory, a Marxist school of thought some decades ago that's been adequately described by others. I won't get into the details. The 1619 Project is a project. It's an effort begun by the New York Times, embraced by many, including the current vice president, and a project to change, to revise history. But facts are stubborn things, and history can't easily be revised. And we want teachers to teach the truth. Not only do we allow them, we as a board and all superintendents in the state of Florida and the legislature and the governor, we require that they teach the truth. And with this amendment, Mr. Chairman, we are adding additional explanation and context for what those truths are. It specifically draws its authority from the statute I mentioned. And I'll just read one or two sections from the statute where in subparagraph 2, it requires historical accuracy, which of course means the truth. In subparagraph 2F, it requires teaching about the history of the United States, including the early period and the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement, and it must be viewed as factual. That's the truth. And subparagraph H might be most important to most of the speakers we heard today. And this is a statute. This isn't a rule. This is law in Florida. This is not the governor. This is not the State Board of Education. This is the legislature. This is Democrats and Republicans who have adopted the statute. And the statute requires that we teach the history of African Americans, including the history of African peoples before the political conflicts that led to the development of slavery, the passage to America, the enslavement experience, abolition, and the contributions of African Americans to society. All of the points made by speakers today and in the emails about teaching the truth and discussing things in our history that are uncomfortable but true must be taught, will be taught. But that's not to say that opinion and narrative, disguising as fact, promoted by others with a different agenda, intended to divide us into racial buckets, that's not the truth. And that should be prohibited in Florida schools. I received one email from a woman in Punta Gorda that I do want to refer to. I'm going to read a portion of it, very short. "'Tis with heavy heart I write this letter. I was appalled to hear from a child I babysit for who is 8 years old, a very tender age, that she and her classmates were being taught how to basically judge others by their skin color, also known as CRT. I'm from Chicago. I remember the race riots. Do you? My guess is no, or you wouldn't push these lies on innocent children. We had race riots, of course, throughout the 60s, particularly in the late 60s, and Chicago had its share. We had, I guess I wouldn't call them riots necessarily, but we certainly had unrest in our cities last year in 2020. So there are some comparisons. Martin Luther King, back when cities were burning in 1968, said that to the chanters in those cities who were saying, "Burn, baby, burn," watching these cities burn, which in many instances were minority communities with fires that were started in minority communities. Martin Luther King said, no, it's not burn, baby, burn. It's learn, baby, learn. So you can earn, baby, earn. And that's our job, as I see it, on the Board of Education. We need to allow kids from all walks of life, all colors, all of whom, in my view, should be treated equally and through a colorblind lens. We need to give them every opportunity to learn and every opportunity to succeed. We in the state of Florida have made great progress in recent years on all fronts, including the achievement gap, which is, of course, a measurement of the performance of kids from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, and different racial categories. We don't want to stop that progress. COVID is a bump in the road. It's a new challenge. We heard about that from the superintendents. It's a challenge, and we'll get past it. But with this amendment, Mr. Chairman, I think that it gives comfort, or hopefully will give some comfort to those who think we're trying to avoid teaching the truth in the state of Florida. And it instead requires that the kids learn real history, real facts, not fiction, not propaganda, not theory or project as truth. But as the governor said, history must be factual and not narratives. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would like to just let the kids learn and hope the board would support this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. Chancellor Oliva, would you like to formally read the amendment that Mr. Grady is offering so
Sure.
it's in the record?
So if you turn to the rules section, part 3, section B, is where the additional language that has been posted and spoken on is already been presented and reviewed, but there's some additional languages to the addition of that rule that Mr. Grady is proposing. So I'm going to read section B in its entirety as it would be recommended for consideration for adoption. When you look at 3B, it starts by saying instruction on the required topics must be factual and objective and may not suppress or distort significant historical events such as the Holocaust, slavery, the Civil War and Reconstruction, the Civil Rights Movement, and the contributions of women, African American, and Hispanic people to our country, as already provided in section 1003.42 of Florida statutes. Examples of theories that distort historical events and are inconsistent with state board approved standards include the denial or minimization of the Holocaust and the teaching of critical race theory, meaning the theory that racism is not merely a product of prejudice, but that racism is embedded in American society and its legal systems in order to uphold the supremacy of white persons. Instruction may not utilize material from the 1619 Project and may not define American history as something other than the creation of a new nation based largely on universal principles stated in the Declaration of Independence. Instruction must include U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and subsequent amendments.
Thank you, Chancellor Oliva. Do we want to entertain a motion to approve Mr. Grady's amendment to the amendment?
So moved.
Didn't Mr. Grady make the motion?
Did he make a motion or did?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, okay. So we have a motion. Do you want a second?
I'll second.
Okay, this is the motion and second on the amendment to the amendment. Is there any more discussion? Mr. Gibson.
I appreciate Member Grady, my fellow lawyer on the board, bringing us back to the law and the statute, because I do think that a lot of what we heard today, it's important to look at what's already in the law and what's already mandated by not us, not the governor, but the legislature, and has been there quite a while. And when we hear comments like today about whitewashing history or not allowing teachers to teach the truth, I think this clarity is very helpful. One of the things I also will applaud Mr. Grady, Member Grady, about is, and I'll point out the word in here, examples of theories, because I think that while we've had a lot of focus on critical race theory, we've talked about the 1619 Project, and one of my concerns initially, I had the concern that this maybe didn't go far enough. I think this addresses that. I think it also shows that these are examples, because as we're seeing more and more types of new learning theories are coming into academia. And so I think it's important that we're not just limiting it to this, but these are examples of things that are not grounded in statute, are not grounded in fact and truth, but would be somebody's theory or belief. So I support the amendment and thank Member Grady for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Any other comments from the board? Hearing none, all in favor? Oh, I'm sorry.
I would like to.
Hold on just a second. We got another member who wants to comment here.
Well, I'd like to speak to the original rule. Are we going to take
We're
time
going to go
separate
to that
from
one after this one.
Okay. Well, then, as it relates to this particular language, I certainly appreciate and understand the need to be more specific. In all frankness, as the newbie on the State Board of Education, there are certainly some educational constructs that I'm just not familiar with. And the reference to the 1619 project specifically, I don't have any familiarity with it and would be uncomfortable voting on something that I haven't had a chance to review, be briefed, and do my own research on. So as I look at this language, I certainly appreciate the intent, but I would prefer to have a little bit more time to evaluate it before I have to vote on it.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if this is an opportunity to ask a question or if we're in debate. Are we in debate, discussion at this point?
This is the board's time to ask questions.
Okay. It seems to me that the rule in general, the debate that we've had here today, I went through some of the town hall, several other board members did, where we had a pretty rigorous discussion about curriculum, our standards, and it seemed like that there's an opportunity at that point to have these kind of conversations. So Jacob, help me understand that process of how we go about coming up with the standards and the curriculum. You did a little bit of this on the front end, but I think it's important to bring us back to that on the back end, that process and what we went through and how we come to the curriculum that we have today.
Sure.
That Florida follows.
Sure. So great question. So if we go kind of historically in time, in 1996, Florida formally adopted the Sunshine State Standards. And what that meant is that we, as a state board at that time, I wasn't part of the department then. I was a teacher back then, so I remember when these were rolled out, is saying we need to be very clear on setting the expectations of what we want students to know and learn at each grade level, because we want grades to grow systematically and be scaffolded throughout the continuum for every single subject. And the first time we did that as a state was in 1996. Once we set those standards and we say in kindergarten, every child should be able to write their name, every child should be able to count to 10, every child should know their colors. We set those clear expectations. That is the foundation for what I say the house of learning is built on, because teachers take those standards, and those are the experts that are in the classroom in design instruction and bring in curriculum that is used to help teach those expectations and those standards. So I call it the CIA. We have our curriculum, our instruction, and then we have assessments on how do we measure whether or not students are learning what we expect them to learn. So when we talk about curriculum, that comes in many different packages. The most common reference, and we would say it's our primary instructional tool, is the textbook. Well, when we put out a call for textbooks, we put out a call that says these books must be aligned to our standards, and the decisions on those textbooks, the decisions on those supplementary and ancillary materials are done at the local level. There's a process that's outlined on how do you review and do a competitive procurement and do a competitive bid, and there are requirements that these primary instructional tools must be aligned to the standards, but our local school boards, our local officials at the local level make the ultimate and final decision on how they're going to bring in the curriculum that teachers use to develop lessons and instruction around. So a lot of the conversation around this rule is making sure that we are faithfully and dutifully teaching our standards. The conversations, and we've even heard comments around what should be taught, and maybe we need to talk about revisions of those standards. That would be under a standard review process. That is not what this rule is asking us to do. When we do a standards review process, we are consistently want to make sure that we involve stakeholder feedback and input and do it in a transparent manner. And that's something that takes several months. It takes several rounds of feedback. It takes several reiterations. And it involves content experts. It involves teacher experts, university and college experts. And we want to engage Florida teachers throughout that process to design Florida standards to be implemented in Florida classrooms by our Florida experts. So what this rule does is not changing any of the current standards that are already in place, just ensuring that when we bring in materials and we bring in ancillary supplementary materials, when we bring in curriculum, that curriculum is aligned with the standards, and that we are dutifully and faithfully teaching the standards as we expect that outline and expectation of what students should know and learn be done accordingly.
That was well done, Jacob. Thank you for that answer. And members and Chair, I think that my point and maybe my concern on the amendment is that I'm a little concerned that we are getting into the curriculum aspect of, I support the rule that's on the original rule that was proposed today. And I support a lot of the spirit of what Board Member Grady is trying to do in his rule. And I'm not a lawyer, I'm a business person, but I like to simplify things. And to me, when you start adding things in that won't be included, I really think that that probably is more of a process for what we do when we go through a curriculum, when we add standards, when we have those debates. And here's my concern, is if we start doing that here, then we're bypassing that process. And process is very important. And I think we can accomplish all the goals that the original rule is intent to do, but I think when we start adding to it, we start making it more complex, and we start creating a slippery slope that another board can continue to add to, and it goes around the process that we do that Jacob so eloquently outlined. And so I think I'm a no on this amendment, although I am in support of the spirit of it. I do support the original amendment.
If I could, I think Member Grady's amendment is an excellent one, and I would recommend supporting it. I think what we were trying to do was, in the original amendment, we just talked about the Holocaust, and what I think Member Grady did a great job of explaining is, if you look at the statute, it's not just the Holocaust, it's about slavery, the civil rights movement, all of the required instruction that has been passed by the legislature and former legislatures, former governors, as statute, as law. And so we are trying to put into the rule as much transparency and clarity, and so there would be no misunderstandings, and saying here's what's required instead. It's not just the Holocaust, it's all these other things too. I think that's a great addition. The second part is trying to give clarity of, well, so if, you know, around the controversy around the rule, what are we talking about? And it's like, okay, here's two examples of what we're talking about that are not facts. What we are saying with the required statute, teach these required factual things and teach them truthfully. What are things that are not? These are two examples. And I think that the amendment is excellent. It gives clarity and understanding and transparency and speaks directly to anybody. If I'm a classroom teacher in 6th grade in Pasco County, or a 9th grade teacher in Duval County, I can read this and say, okay, I get what they're saying. Follow the statute, follow the law, which has been outlined by Democrat and Republican legislators for decades. And then also, okay, now I understand that very clearly. It's in statute, it's in law, but what are some things that I should be, you know, looking at or be concerned about? Well, here's two examples. And I think that gives those teachers that it's a great transparent way for teachers to understand exactly what this board is saying, and to be able to read it and know that they're protected.
Hold on just a minute. Vice Chair Johnson, did you have a comment or a question earlier?
I did, and thank you so much. And again, I apologize because I'm still watching Commissioner Corcoran speak, although I know he's finished. So I will tell you that I struggled with this rule, not foundationally because I disagree with it, because I wholeheartedly believe that we need our teachers to teach to the standard. And the standards should always be grounded in truth. And I listened to not just the commenters that came to give testimony today, but also to the people who were thoughtful enough to also send written correspondence to us through the Department of Education, and in general conversation. And my concern with the initial rule as proposed was that the inclusion of one example when there were numerous examples, as Member Grady's amendment thoughtfully addresses, that could have had equal weight within that context. That was my first concern, and I want to thank you, Member Grady, for your thoughtfulness in proposing an amendment that I think addressed that concern very well. My second concern with the initial rule as proposed was the reference to teachings grounded in the Declaration of Independence. And it's not that I disagree with that. Of course, I want our students to be educated in truth and educated in a way that upholds our nation's founding principles. What was problematic was that it seemed to put a marker in time, and in my head, it created more confusion about what is actually American history than clarity. And so I also, for that reason, believe that Member Grady's amendment helps with that clarity, and it gives greater context. So again, Member Grady, I want to thank you for your thoughtfulness in that context. What I do still think is a little unfortunate about the proposal is the specific reference to critical race theory and the 1619 theories, just because they are temporal examples, and meaning that, in my perspective, I want this rule to be one that's long-standing, so that 10 years from now, this rule still has the same understanding and appreciation and application as it did now. And so I don't know that we need to give examples. I think teaching to the standards and teaching the truth and teaching from the diverse perspectives or the diverse factual histories of all Americans is what Mr. Grady's amendment offers. And so I'm, between the two of them, I think right now my preference is for Mr. Grady's amendment over the original one, but I also would support Member Brown's request to have some additional time to consider the item.
Okay, Mr. Grady?
Is there more comment?
Oh, did you have
I just had just a follow-up comment to
go ahead.
some of the other members' comments. So, and again, I do think that, kind of as the commissioner stated, when I read the First Amendment, I saw the reference to 1003.42 subsection 2, and I went in and I read the entire statute, and I saw in there, stuff in the statute that talks about, and this is in the context of the Holocaust and teaching the Holocaust, but then it goes even further that said the Holocaust is supposed to be taught in a manner that leads to an investigation of human behavior, an understanding of the ramifications of prejudice, racism, and stereotyping, and an examination of what it means to be a responsible and respectful person for the purposes of encouraging tolerance of diversity in a pluralistic society and for nurturing and protecting democratic values and institutions. I then saw what is now referenced in this amendment, where it talks about the history of the United States, the Civil War, it talks about the Civil Rights Movement all the way to the present. And then it also gets into exactly what this rule says here, the history of African Americans, the study of Hispanic contributions, the contributions of women. And so immediately when I saw that, I said, wow, I feel really comfortable with that, because we're not trying to just ignore history. What we're doing is we're looking at, okay, this is history. There's good parts about our history. There's bad parts about our history. But what we want in our classroom is we want to teach history as full and complete, and as the legislature has mandated here as well. I think that, when we talk about this rule, I think this context from a legal standpoint is unnecessary. However, I think it's very important that when we're telling teachers, here's what you need to teach, that we're very clear in how we communicate exactly, here's what you're supposed to teach, here's what you're not supposed to teach. My fear is that if we're not clear in that message, that a teacher could unknowingly, go ahead and teach something and be violating the rule and not be sort of put on notice. I do think that, again, and I think that this is why I pointed out before, using the word examples of theories, this is, the 1619 Project, critical race theory, we're talking about this today. If we want this to be long-standing, we have to say these are examples, and we can come back later and we could add additional examples that are going to pop up. But ultimately, this is a rule. Ultimately, and I think the governor has said this before, the legislature is going to need to step in and act on this and pass some legislation, probably amending 1003.42 subsection 2, to put some of this stuff in there to make it actually permanent and more clear. But for now, we're the state board, and we have the ability to provide direction as far as what aligns with the standards, what does not align with the standards, and I think this rule really does that, and it's not unclear in its message, and that's so important. I think when we're telling teachers, here's what you can teach, here's what you can't teach, we got to make sure that we're clear, because not everyone is going to just sort of get it and get our intent, and I think our intent should be clear.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Mr. Grady, do you have, do you want to go ahead and close on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to perhaps follow up on Member York's concerns and perhaps Member Johnson's concerns as well. And Member Brown, too, for that matter. I understand the 1619 project is not something that she has studied to date, and I'm guessing that's probably true with a lot of us. But if you look at it, it doesn't take, in fact, very quickly, at least for me, you can conclude that it's not fact. It's not truth. It's argument. Maybe you like it, maybe you agree with it, maybe you don't. And here's one simple example. The first tenet of the project says, quote, "Our democracy's founding ideals were false when they were written. Black Americans have fought to make them true," close quote. I think that's partially true. I think Black Americans have certainly fought to make them true. Black Americans haven't attempted to overthrow the Constitution or the government of the United States. People like Martin Luther King or W.E.B. Du Bois or Booker T. Washington, they have instead tried to, as Dr. King said, cash the check written by the founders that unfortunately was returned as insufficient funds until the 1960s. The history of America is full of best efforts, but failure at times because we're people. The founding ideals, false when written, really bothers me. Because if you look at the Constitution preamble, if you actually read it, and I wonder how many people have read the document, at least recently. The preamble begins, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union." And I'll just stop there. A more perfect union. No one ever raised their hand in the 1776 convention or in the 1787 convention and said, we're perfect. We know everything. It's very clear from our history that there was bitter disagreement about many issues, including slavery at the time of the founding of this country. And one of the inalienable and well-established truths is that America was the first slave-owning country in the history of the world to ban slave ownership in 1776. Yes, it didn't go far enough, but the northern states banned slavery, and the first thing the Congress did was to ban slavery in expansionist territories and states. So we weren't perfect. We can look back and say that was a mistake. It was a different time. The average life expectancy for a white urban worker in the middle 1800s, around the time of the Civil War, was 16 years. That doesn't sound like white privilege. It's not a good thing, perhaps, but it's not a racial thing. So the amendment, again, tracks the statute. The statute has existed for quite some time. And the original founding documents criticized by the 1619 Project, I believe, had ideals that were true when written in the same way that the Ten Commandments, in my view, were true when written, even though we regularly fail them as human beings. So we're not perfect, but we have a Constitution. It brings us all together as a people. This amendment to the proposed rule tracks the statute, tracks the Constitution, is respectful of all of the comments we heard today and in the emails, because it wants to teach our kids the truth so that they can get on with their lives, learn, and earn and become productive citizens with great jobs and great lives in America. So I would encourage all members to please support the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. All right, all in favor of the amendment that Mr. Grady has opposed, say aye.
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 All opposed?
No.
Show the motion carries. Now we will go on to the rule as amended.
I'd like to make some comments, if I may. Or is that what you're turning it over?
Well, let's get a motion and a second on the rule as amended, and then we'll.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Now.
Second.
Great,
Brown.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a couple of points. First, as I read the initial rule, I really read it to fine-tune the requirements that a teacher must teach to the standards. And I'm not an educator, but I am a lawyer, and I view it very similarly to a lawyer taking an oath and being held accountable to meeting whatever the Florida bar rules are when the rules exist. And so in my mind, this was very similar, and I certainly support it. Second, I had the opportunity last night to attend a public hearing with Chancellor Oliva, where we heard over an hour's worth of comments regarding this rule. Even though we weren't there for this rule, we were there for a future rule that will come before us in a future meeting. And it was great for me to hear from educators, some who were here today, but a lot of the speakers were former and current teachers. And their primary concern was, we want to have the ability to teach. We want to do what's right. We want to be honest and truthful in teaching history. And what I walked away from, and I'd certainly love to hear Chancellor Oliva's perspective on this, I walked away thinking, that maybe the real issue is a need for the department to evaluate the standards related to U.S. history and to social studies. These standards, I think, haven't been updated for at least 20 years. And I know the board and the department has spent time over focusing on English language arts as well as math, but I think there's a great opportunity to look into revising those standards. And then lastly, I believe the issue of controversy really can be addressed, similar, I think, to my other board member, Gibson, who referenced just the importance of making sure that there's clarity for the teachers so they know exactly what they're supposed to teach. And to me, I see that as an opportunity to advance more specific professional development and looking at ways that we can make sure that they're prepared when they're in the classroom, when they're dealing with controversial issues. So I would just also add that as a potential opportunity for the department to consider looking at professional development in this space.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on the rule as amended? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Before we go on to the next action item, I got to do something from a professional and a personal standpoint. Representative Cord Bird walked in earlier, and I didn't notice him, so I wanted to recognize him, and please don't take it out on one of your young legislators that are on your committee. Thank you. All right, next item is item number 8, and that is Tim Hay.
Good morning. Chair Tuck, Commissioner, board members. I just want to say, too, it's really, just a blessing to live in a state that has really strong, proactive leaders, both at the state and local level. And it's all the work that you're doing to remain proactive really means a lot to me personally, and I really appreciate the work that you do. The benefit of the proposed rule will be enhancements of health and safety due to greater accountability by school districts and public schools. It provides school districts, including charters, with notice of Office of Safe Schools requirements relating to school safety and procedures for monitoring and addressing issues of suspected noncompliance with safety requirements, including required reporting and training. It sets forth requirements relating to school safety and to define certain safety measures that schools are expected to meet. It also provides a useful tool for all involved in implementing or overseeing school safety and outline what the requirements and responsibilities are for the Office of Safe Schools, school districts, and public schools. And here's an overview of the areas that this strengthens and provides clarity, and really lays out those expectations and prescribes steps for ensuring documentation is provided to specific school safety requirements. Here's some expectations and requirements outlined in rule. The role of the Office of Safe Schools, responsible for monitoring school districts and public schools, including public charter schools, for compliance with school safety statutes and rules. The Office of Safe Schools provides notice of suspected deficiencies to school safety specialists and required corrective action. We also verify compliance or correction for suspected deficiencies. And next, we outline the role of the district school safety specialists. They're responsible for supervision and oversight for all school safety and security personnel, policies, and procedures in the school districts, including at public charter schools. They also serve as the point of contact between the Florida Department of Education and the school districts regarding any compliance concerns. And they also facilitate cooperation and communication with schools to address areas of concern. It is in all of our best interest to maintain a proactive stance in all school safety, and Florida is leading the way. We must continue to be focused and driven to our mission. So much of this program's strength is due to the vision of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas families and the dedication of our school safety professionals. It's our goal to continue to work together with your leadership to make positive changes to ensure all schools are safe. Thank you.
Do you have any questions, Mr. Gibson?
Thank you for that. I really love the word that you use, proactive, because I think that's so important, especially in this area. Can you just talk a little bit briefly about what within this rule is based on things that your office has seen, working in the field, getting feedback from the schools, and how is that implemented in here?
Yeah, so this past school year was the first full year that we've had our teams out in the regions and out in the field visiting schools. And so when there would be areas of questions as far as language that's in statute or in law that would need some clarity, then that's kind of how this all kind of started to progress and happen and get cleared up in rule. We've outlined and defined specifically what a school day is, and providing clarity and expectation of what that looks like and how that can be implemented within the districts.
Mr. Petty?
I think I should provide a comment or two. Tuesday evening, I had the honor of receiving an honorary diploma for my daughter, who would have graduated on Tuesday. And as difficult as that was, it brings home, I hope, to everyone, the importance of the work that the Office of Safe Schools does in the Department of Education. I support this. I support what Mr. Hay is proposing here because, as we learned very painfully personally, but also in our investigation as part of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Commission, our districts had different definitions. They didn't understand what they were supposed to do. And Member Gibson, your point about clarity, I think rings true, not only when we're talking about curriculum, but certainly when we're talking about the very lives of our teachers and our students in our schools. And so we had probably 70 definitions of some of these things, and everybody was reporting based on what they thought their definition was. So the work that the Office of Safe Schools has done, and the leadership, Commissioner, on your part, to drive clear roles and responsibilities and clear definitions was really the first phase of helping to improve the safety in our schools in Florida. And that work, that took a lot of work. It took a lot of effort to get everybody to understand, A, the importance, and B, get aligned definitionally. So I'm pleased with where we're at, and I'm pleased with where the Office of Safe Schools has gotten the districts. They understand the importance, they understand the definitions, and they better understand their responsibilities. And we may be discussing this a little bit later in the agenda, but as part of a preview, I think now we're going to start measuring more frequently, not just at the end of the school year, but every month. And I think that's important because that data that we collected as a state for a number of years, that every district interpreted differently, isn't just for us. It's not just to put up on a website or for Mr. Hay to read when he's bored, which he's never bored. It was for the use of the districts. It was so that they could take action and improve school safety. So having that on a monthly basis and knowing where they're at and knowing where the problems are, I think will be a tremendous improvement. So I applaud the steps we're taking. Get aligned on definitions, get everybody reporting regularly, and now let's improve the frequency with which we report, and now let's remind the districts that this is their data. It's for them to use to improve their schools and the safety of their schools. So, with that, Mr. Chair, I'll leave that.
Thank you very much. If there's no other questions, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Ms. Chancellor Kathy Hebda, Florida College System. On approval of Rule 6A-14.0582.
Nope. That.
Okay.
No, that one down.
Oh, okay. Didn't have my next calendar. Okay. Oh, it's PDF. Presentations?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's not a PowerPoint presentation on the computer right now, but it's a pretty straightforward rule, so I'll talk about it. It looks like there's a copy coming around to you. So the 2020 legislature passed Senate Bill, just forgot the number, 646, that provided for this July 1st, there will be an opportunity for athletes who play collegiate sports, intercollegiate athletics, to actually be compensated for their name, image, and likeness. And the statute sets out parameters for how that can be done. And this rule then provides some specificity around two pieces of that legislation that will help implement that rule beginning July 1st. If you look over to slide 4, then you'll see a summary of what the statute does. As I mentioned, the statute is pretty specific. And then the next slide will show you specifically what we do in our rule. The first thing that we do is take all the responsibilities of the student athletes and group them together so they're easily found by an institution wanting to implement. And then the next thing that we do, as you can see, what those are is to mainly notify the institution that they're going to have a contract or they're going to seek compensation for their name, image, and likeness. And the only requirement for that contract is it doesn't conflict with anything that is part of the team contract where they're playing sports. And then the next slide actually shows you, slide 6, shows you the responsibilities of the FCS institution, which is to make sure that student athletes are allowed to be compensated. They can't prevent this from happening. They also cannot provide compensation themselves, nor can any of their associations or organizations such as boosters or foundations. That can only be done through a third party. And the statute puts some parameters around what those individuals who could serve as agents, what their requirements are. We make sure in our rule that all the boards of trustees adopt policies around this, and secondly, that they provide this information to athletes during the recruitment process, so that athletes that are considering signing on at that institution know all their requirements and what they need to do prior to making their decision of where to go to school. The last thing that we do is we put some requirements on the next slide. You'll see those around the financial literacy course. The statute requires a 5-hour financial literacy course to be delivered to student athletes that are seeking compensation in the first and third years of their enrollment and participation. Since our colleges are primarily many times 2-year colleges for students who are in the 2+2 system, we're requiring in our rule that all athletes, student athletes, participate in the financial literacy course, because they could decide at any time to determine that they want to receive compensation for their name, image, and likeness. So that way everyone benefits from the financial literacy course. And then we provide some examples of how that course can be delivered through current or new curriculum. A little bit of background, of the 28 institutions in the Florida college system, 24 actually participate in intercollegiate athletic sports of various kinds. And they belong to an association called the NJCAA, or National Junior College Athletic Association. Most of the time we hear about the NCAA, which the larger schools belong to. Both the NCAA and the NJCAA have requirements for their members, institutions, that they are currently not allowed, student athletes are not allowed to receive compensation for their NIL, nor can anybody serve as an agent for a student athlete. Both the NCAA and the NJCAA have signaled that they're considering changing their requirements later this month. We'll see if they do, but whether they do or don't, our rule will go into effect, the statute will go into effect, and Florida will be amongst the first first states to implement this opportunity for athletics.
Okay. Do you have any questions for Chancellor Hebda? Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Chancellor Hebda. I think obviously the NIL, name, image, likeness, has gotten a lot of attention on the university level. I think some people were surprised to know that this also applies to our state colleges, which is great. I think that they should have the same opportunity. Just to clarify, how does this rule compare to what BOG is implementing on their side?
Thank you, Member Gibson. It's very similar. They track the statute a lot, similar ways that we do. One thing that ours does is the requirement that I mentioned that all athletes take the financial literacy course. And the other thing that's in their regulation that they'll be considering later this month as well is they provide some parameters around the trademarks for their college or universities, that the student can only use those trademarks if permitted by the university expressly. Those are the major differences. So they're pretty similar.
Great.
We've discussed it with the legislative sponsors, and I think they're very happy with our rule.
I'm excited about the financial literacy. I think all of the college students, student athletes should have that requirement, but they can just come to a state college and get that experience.
That's right.
I think all students should have that requirement,
right.
actually,
Yeah.
even in our high schools. So,
But it's good. It's a good rule. On that point, who does the student is the student required to pay for that financial literacy course, or is that they're not? So it's provided free of cost to the. That's great.
That's great.
Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now, Chancellor Oliva again. Approval of Amendment 6A-1.0943.
I think when I started, it was good morning, good afternoon to the board, and thank you for allowing me to bring this very important rule to you today for consideration. We talked a lot about standards today, and I say if that's kind of the educational house that we build our foundation on curriculum and instruction and assessments are the walls and the roof that complete the whole building. So when we talk about assessments and we talk about students in what we would refer to as a general education setting, we want those standards and students to meet those expectations and then take the according assessments that align with measuring student progress. Well, there is a population of students that we serve throughout this great state of Florida that the standards written at grade level and the associated assessments may not be appropriate developmentally or cognitively for a certain population of students. So states are allowed in our federal guidance. We have federal laws that overlook how we meet the support for students with disabilities, do allow for states to develop and implement what's referred to as an alternative assessment for this population of students. With that, there is a caveat that not more than 1% of your total student population should exceed the participation on that alternative assessments. And if you are a state that has exceeded that, then we need to write an action plan and report back to U.S. Department of Education. What are some of the strategies that we can put in place to make sure that we're moving the needle in the right direction? So you can see here on these charts, there's a listing of just about all the states and where that 1% line is. And this is back to 17 and 18 participation in English language arts. And you can see state of Florida is a little bit over that 1%. And we have some opportunities to improve in that area. And this is for that same year in math. You can see that there's even more opportunity in math to try to reduce the number of students participating in alternative assessments. So we put together a work group to develop strategies and come up with ideas of what can we do as a state to better move the needle in the right direction. And one of the things that we found is we didn't have clear guidelines or clear definition of what does it mean to be a student with a significant cognitive disability. So what you will see in this rule is with the stakeholder feedback and input, we put some clearer definitions on what does it mean to be a student with a significant cognitive disability, what type of learner profile would meet this requirement, and what kind of students with disabilities wouldn't meet this requirement, because the expectation and the parameters that we want is for every student to have an opportunity to participate in a general education setting and work towards meeting those standard expectations that we want for we know for all of our students. But if a student is not able to, and through the individual education plan meetings, meet those standards expectations and need to be on what's called the access point standards and participate in alternative assessment, did we do everything appropriately to meet that expectation? So we're asking for consideration from the state board to help us better clarify to the field what is the learner profile for a student that would qualify or better be suited by participating in an alternative assessment. You can see if we put these parameters in place, here's our data from 17, 18, and 18, 19, where we are with ELA, math, and science. Just by putting these parameters in place, we will begin to move the needle in the right direction, but we know that's not enough. We're going to continue to train, we're going to continue to provide opportunity, and we're going to continue to learn from each other. With that, Chair Tuck, I'll entertain any questions.
Okay, before we go to the board for questions, we got one public speaker.
I don't see him.
Okay.
I don't see him. See if he's still here.
Dr. Jeff
Oh, yeah, he is right there.
Scumromick. And you'll have 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair, and members of the board and Commissioner Chancellor, Senior Chancellor. I'm Dr. Jeff Skronik, Executive Director of Pepin Academies, which is a 501c3, tuition-free, independent charter school in Hillsborough and Pasco counties. We've got campuses in Tampa, Riverview, and Newport Richey. We are an ESE center where 100% of our students have IEPs with a wide variety of disabilities. Our focus is on their unique learning styles, right? And so just like you, the goal is to ask the question, how do we elevate their learning styles to get the maximum potential out of every student? And in fact, in my time as Executive Director, which has been 3 years, I've actually had complaints come from parents up to the state because they were disappointed we were not pushing their students on access points. The goal is to give our students every potential they have. And the concern, and the reason I drove up here today to this rule, is that we're concerned at Pepin Academies that the constraints put into the rule don't do enough to tackle the process that we have implemented over 21 some odd years. And respectfully, I've had amazing conversations down with the Chancellor, Senior Chancellor, and members of the Bureau. I look forward to continuing those conversations. I've shared the concerns. I'm not going to necessarily reiterate the concerns. They're surrounding the IQ cutoff and the need to be on access points for 2 FTEs. We've shared the concerns. What I'm hoping by making public comment today is that we can continue the dialogue together to not necessarily continue to constrain rules, but look at the process that people are using to maybe skirt that system. Because in that process is where we have excelled over the last 21 years in ensuring our students reach their potential. The rules will constrain us. It'll take students off of access that we've worked diligently to ensure that they belong there. Right, and then we don't serve our students the best we can in that process. So I thank you all for the dialogue we've had over the last couple of days, and I hope to continue it in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Okay, is there any questions from the board on this rule? Hearing none, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, that brings us to our consent items. So I have a motion.
So move.
I got a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor of approving the consent items, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll move on to member comments, starting with Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to thank all the individuals who took time out of their day to come talk to the board over the rule that we passed. I think it's a great rule. I think Florida, and thanks again to the governor's leadership in pushing this, the commissioner's leadership. We are now there's been about 9 states that have passed laws banning critical race theory from being taught in schools. But in Florida, once again, is at the forefront of this in making sure that what's taught in our classrooms, number one, is aligned to standards. And I think through this rule, we were also very clear about what teachers are supposed to be teaching, which is outlined in law, and what they're not supposed to be teaching. This is not happening, obviously, in a vacuum. There's a discussion going on around the country. There are some states that are actually passing laws to mandate critical race theory to be taught in classrooms. So there's a big difference here. I'm very proud of where Florida is. I'm proud of the position that we've taken on that. I do think that there's more to do, especially in the legislative realm. And I know we had Representative Byrd here earlier. I hope that's something that this board can do in working with the legislature to further strengthen that and provide clarity around those requirements. But I do thank everyone who came. This is a very passionate topic, and I think that I hope that this rule will do more to unite us than divide us, because we need to come around core principles that we believe in and that this country was founded on, and that we can all be proud of as Americans and as Floridians.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Mr. York?
Yeah, well, first off, it's great to have everybody in my hometown, and I appreciate Florida State College hosting us here, and I want to reflect back on Superintendent Green's comments to us at the beginning of this very long meeting. where a lot of our kids, my kids, finish their last day of schools today. And a lot of schools are having graduation ceremonies, etc. What an incredibly challenging year it has been for our teachers, our principals, our school administrators, our department staff. I can't be more proud of our state, our teachers, our principals, and what they have managed through. And there were so many days in the last year where I was really grateful that I lived in the state of Florida. And, elections matter. And the last election had a substantial impact on that outcome. And so I'm grateful that we kept schools open. I'm grateful that our teachers managed through a lot of challenges of teaching kids in class, but also following up with kids online, dealing with, tons of emails, kids that if they had a runny nose, they were sending them home, and for good reason. So it's been an incredibly challenging year. Sometimes we think that maybe we need more grit in our world. We certainly got a lot of that in the last year, and so I think that's something to reflect on as we enter into the summer months. I agree. I love to see people who come and speak and take their time, including the last gentleman who waited the entire meeting, came all the way from Tampa to weigh in on a particular rule. So I think that is part of our process. That was what makes America so special. And, as I was thinking about this meeting and this rule and all the media coverage, the one thing that disappoints me a little bit is that this time of year we deal with the schools that are D or F performing schools. And I would love to see some of that passion be there for those schools as it was for this rule. That would be really great, because that is one of the most important things that we deal with, is trying to get these schools that are underperforming to performing at a level that is really educating our kids. And so I'm hopeful that as we go forward, we'll see more passion in that regard as well. And it's not that I don't appreciate the passion that we had here today and the good debate that we had, but I would really love to see more of it when we get to those kind of issues as well. Chair, thank you for running this meeting. Not an easy meeting to run, but you did a good job. So it's good to be with you all today.
Thank you. Ms. Brown, welcome in person finally.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, in spite of the controversy. This was a great meeting, and I appreciate all of the time and energy that the team at the department put in to get me up to speed on things. I was calling them first thing 2 days ago in the morning, last night, at the end of the night, and just it's so important to me that I get this right, and I know it's important to all of you, and so I really take the responsibility so seriously. And like I said, I'm not an educator, but my mother is a retired high school teacher, not from Florida, and she has this little desk plate that says, I teach for the money and fame. And I think it's hysterical, but I also think we all recognize that teachers are in this business to do good and to make a difference in the lives of children. And I just want to reiterate my personal passion that we continue to acknowledge our teachers and raise them up so that they can raise the children up that we value so much, and in the work that we're doing here today, and as we continue to think about them moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Petty?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm more accustomed, I think, to speaking extemporaneously, but I actually wrote some things down the other day because I wasn't quite sure where the discussion today would lead. And I wanted to have myself grounded in some principles that I believe are true. And I appreciated what Member Grady said. His thoughts echoed mine. A more perfect union. Not a perfect union, but a more perfect union than what had existed prior under the rule of the king, but more importantly, than had existed in all of human history. And I think that context sometimes gets lost in the discussions over this theory or that theory. What we benefit from as Americans is unprecedented in human history. I think our founders understood that the government they were establishing was imperfect, but it was one that could eventually unite all of the citizens under the principles that they recognized as universal. I thought a lot about Dr. Martin Luther King. We've all heard his famous speech. And I hearken back to some of his words where he said, "The architects of our great republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. They were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir." Sometimes we have trouble living up to that. But the process that we've gone through to define our rules, the open and transparent way in which we engage with the public, and in which those that are subject to the rules that we vote on have an opportunity to speak and present and share their thoughts, is the process. It is governing by consent, and it is the process that will get us the furthest. I think, unfortunately, we live in a time where there are forces at play that would subvert that open and transparent process and would seek to change what is being taught in our schools in what I view as a nefarious way, and certainly not an open and transparent way. So I appreciate what has occurred today. And over the months and weeks, as the Department of Education has gone around the state to seek public input and consent and comment. I'll just close by saying, Lincoln, in a speech just after the Dred Scott decision, said, the assertion that all men are created equal was of no practical use in effecting our separation from Great Britain. And it was placed in the Declaration not for that, but for future use. Its authors meant it to be, thank God, it is now proving itself, a stumbling block to those who in after times might seek to turn a free people back into the hateful paths of despotism. Like Lincoln, I pray that the principles defined in our founding documents and the blood spilled to affirm them will continue to be a stumbling block for those that seek to define and divide us by our immutable characteristics, those whose ultimate goal is to destroy our union. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Petty. Mr. Grady?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you and the members and those who drove today to speak to us about the proposed rule change regarding content and regarding curriculum as we implement the statute and the directives that the legislature has given us. We obviously have limited time. We had limited time this morning, but I would encourage anyone who has a real interest in working together and going forward on this topic to reread Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech and to read President Obama's speech that has come to be called the race speech. I don't know if that's fair or not, but it certainly was about race. And coincidentally, I'm looking at it now. I hadn't remembered this when I spoke earlier, but it begins with "We the people, in order to form a more perfect union." So I feel pretty good about the intro that he used. And then he discusses the launch of an improbable experiment in democracy and an imperfect union, but a remarkable document. And the document was obviously prepared by the architects, the founders of our country, but he describes it as ultimately unfinished, and I think most people would agree with that. The Reconstruction amendments went a very long way towards finishing not implementing, finishing and enabling the country to finish, so that, in Dr. King's words, the African American community could cash the check that those architects and those founders wrote. And why I get so, I don't know, emotional about the subject is that it is the exact opposite of everything that is professed in critical racial theory and in the 1619 Project. Those and similar theories, movements, academic discussions really are indirectly addressed in President Obama's speech. And I'd like to find that, and I'll pause and stop at that point. He talked about, 2 seconds, please. Okay. So he's optimistic about the future of America, talks about a remarkable country, emphasizes that in no other country on earth could his story have happened, only in America. But he says, and I'm quoting, "For the African American community, the path forward means embracing the burdens of our past without becoming victims of our past," close quote. And then he talks about taking full responsibility for our own lives. And then he speaks about Reverend Wright. We may remember he was a rather controversial figure during President Obama's first campaign. And President Obama, then candidate Obama, said, quote, "The profound mistake of Reverend Wright's sermons is not that he spoke about racism in our society. It's that he spoke as if our society was static, as if no progress has been made, that we are still irrevocably bound to a tragic past. But what we know, what we have seen, is that America can change. That is the true genius of this nation." And that is exactly the opposite of what critical race theory and the 1619 Project teach. And that is why I feel so grateful that the board considered and approved the amendment today. And I look forward to seeing it implemented throughout the state. And I thank Governor DeSantis for raising this issue. It is truly not a partisan issue. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll just thank you for the opportunity to have spoken today. And I'm sorry I wasn't there in person.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. Vice Chair Johnson.
I just want to adopt the comments of Member Grady first and foremost, so I can truncate my comments a little bit, especially the part about not being there in person. I also just want to, end where we started with Superintendent Green, and I again really am grateful to see her leadership for our students in Duval County. And she talked about the importance of adapting and leading through challenge and change. And that principle is applicable not just in how she and other superintendents responded to COVID. It's applicable in everything that we do. So I just remember those words as being so profound, especially in light of the conversation we had on some of the other rules during today's discussion. And so I also wanted to, like Member Gibson, invite people. I love hearing people engaging in the education policy process. I want to thank those people who were thoughtful enough, again, to send us comments in writing, to share their perspectives in writing, and to drive and travel to share their perspective with us today. But I want to remind you all that this is a rule, and our Department of Education and our State Board of Education, we do rules all the time. And one of the things I love about the execution of the Department of Education team is the rulemaking process is very inclusive and rigorous. And I want to encourage you to be a part of that process, to make sure that as we are developing standards, that we are hearing diverse voices consistently, because that is where we will make sure that we are delivering on our objective and our goal to deliver a high quality education to every Florida student is accomplished. I want to underscore how important it is that we teach to the standards. And we have a rigorous process for establishing those standards. And we need to make sure they are full of truth, and we need to make sure that those truths, again, bring that diverse perspective. I know I can count on Commissioner Corcoran to be an advocate in that, in delivering on that goal. I know he has been, and I know even based on some of the conversations he's heard today and around the state, that he appreciates the importance of making sure there's a diversity of thought in that process. So I want to thank you all, because we do get a number of issues that are important to our state to consider, some more controversial than others. And I want to let you all know I appreciate the demeanor you come to these conversations with. We don't all agree on every single thing, but I always agree that you're bright people and you're focused on what's best for Florida. And I appreciate your commitment to coming to the right answer for Florida students. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Johnson. I'll be brief. Want to make one more recognition. Chair McGee from the Board of Trustees here at Florida State College is with us today, and we had the privilege of going through some of your college yesterday, and very impressed. So when